Chapter 30. Marguerite, while all this careless, light-hearted youth, apparently so at least, was scattering like a gilded whirlwind along the road to Bondy, Catherine, still rolling up the precious parchment to which King Charles had just affixed his signature, admitted into a room a man to whom, a few days before, her captain of the guards had carried a letter addressed to Rue de la Cerisaie, near the arsenal. A broad silk band like a badge of mourning hid one of the man's eyes, showing only the other eye, two prominent cheekbones, and the curve of a vulture's nose, while a grayish beard covered the lower part of his face. He wore a long, thick cloak, beneath which one might have imagined a whole arsenal. Besides this, although it was not the custom of those called to court, he wore at his side a long campaign sword, broad and with a double blade. One of his hands was hidden beneath his cloak, and never left the handle of a long dagger. "Ah, you here, monsieur," said the queen, seating herself. "You know that I promised you after St. Bartholomew, when you rendered us such signal service, not to let you be idle. The opportunity has arisen, or rather I have made it. Thank me, therefore." "Madam, I humbly thank your majesty," replied the man with the black bandage, in a reserved voice at once low and insolent. "A fine opportunity. You will not find another such in your whole life. Make the most of it. Therefore, I am waiting, madam, only after the preamble, I fear, that the commission may not be much. Are not those who wish to advance fond of such commissions? The one of which I speak would be envied by the Taverns and even by the de Guises." "Ah, madam," said the man, "believe me, I am at your majesty's orders, whatever they may be." "In that case, read," said Catherine. She handed him the parchment. The man read it and grew pale. "What?" he exclaimed. "An order to arrest the King of Navarre." "But a king, madam, really, I fear I am not of sufficiently high rank." "My confidence makes you the first gentleman of my court, Monsieur de Marival," said Catherine. "I thank your majesty," said the assassin, so moved that he seemed to hesitate. "You will obey, then? If your majesty orders it, is it not my duty?" "Yes, I order it." "Then I will obey. How shall you go to work?" "Why, madam, I do not know. I should greatly like to be guided by your majesty." "You fear noise." "I admit it. Take a dozen sure men, if necessary. I understand, of course, that your majesty will permit me to do the best I can for myself, and I am grateful to you for this. But where shall I arrest the King of Navarre? Where would it best please you to arrest him?" "In some place in which I should be warranted in doing so, if possible, even by his majesty." "Yes, I understand. In some royal palace. What do you say to the Louvre, for instance?" "Oh, if your majesty would permit it, that would be a great favor." "You will arrest him, then, in the Louvre." "In what part?" "In his own room." Marguerite bowed. "When, madam?" "This evening, or rather tonight." "Very well, madam. Now, will your majesty deign to inform me on one point?" "On what point?" "About the respect due to his position." "Respect? Position?" said Catherine. "Why, then, you do not know, monsieur, that the King of France owes respect to no one in his kingdom, whoever he may be, recognizing no position as equal to his own." Marguerite bowed a second time. "I insist on this point. However, madam, if your majesty will allow me." "I will, monsieur." "If the king contests the authenticity of the order, which is not probable, but, on the contrary, monsieur, he is sure to do so, he will contest it, without a doubt, and consequently he will refuse to obey it." "I fear so." "And he will resist." "Probably." "Ah, the devil," said Marguerite, "and in that case—" "In what case?" said Catherine, not moving her eyes from him. "Why, in case he resists, what is to be done?" "What do you do when you are given an order from the king? That is, when you represent the king, and when there is any resistance, Monsieur de Marguerite?" Why, madam, said the sparrow, when I am honored with such an order, and when this order refers to a simple gentleman, I kill him. I told you, monsieur, said Catherine, and I scarcely think that sufficient time has elapsed for you to have forgotten it, that the King of France recognizes no position in his kingdom, and that after him the greatest a simple gentleman. Marrevel grew pale, for he was beginning to comprehend. Oh, oh, he cried, kill the King of Navarre. Why? Who is speaking of killing him? Where is the order to kill him? The king wishes him taken to the Bastille, and the order contains nothing more. If he lets himself be arrested, very good. But as he will not let himself be arrested, as he will resist, as he will endeavor to kill you. Marrevel grew paler. You will defend yourself, continued Catherine. One cannot ask a brave man like you to let himself be killed without defending himself. And in defending yourself, what can you expect? You must let come what may. You understand me, do you not? Yes, madam, and yet... Come, do you want me to write dead or alive after the words ordered to arrest? I confess, madam, that would do away with my scruples. Well, it must be done, of course, since you do not think the order can be carried out without it. And Catherine shrugged her shoulders, unrolled the parchment with one hand, and wrote with the other, dead or alive. Now, said she, do you consider the order all right? Yes, madam, replied Marrevel, but I beg your majesty to leave the carrying out of the entire affair to me. What have I said that will interfere with it? Your majesty told me to take 12 men. Yes, to make show. Well, I ask permission to take only 6. Why so? Because, madam, if anything happens to the prince, as it probably will, it would be easy to excuse 6 men for having been afraid of losing the prisoner, but no one would excuse 12 guards for not having let half of their number be killed before laying hands on royalty. Fine royalty, in truth, which is no kingdom. Madam, said Marrevel, it is not the kingdom which makes a king, it is birth. Very well, said Catherine, do as you please. Only I must warn you that I do not wish you to leave the Louvre. But, madam, to get my men together, have you not a sort of sergeant whom you can charge with this duty? I have my lackey, who not only is a faithful fellow, but who has even occasionally aided me in this sort of thing. Send for him and confer with him. You know the chamber hung with the king's arms, do you not? Well, your breakfast shall be served there, and from there you shall give your orders. The place will aid you to collect your wits in case they are scattered. Then when my son returns from the hunt, you are to go into my oratory and wait until the time comes. But how are we to get into the room? Probably the king suspects something, and he will shut himself up in it. I have a duplicate key to every door, said Catherine, and the bolts have been removed from Henry's room. Adieu, Monsieur de Marrevel, for a while. I will have you taken to the king's armory. Ah, by the way, remember that the order of a king must be carried out before anything else. No excuse is admissible. A defeat, even a failure, would compromise the honor of the king. It is a serious matter. And Catherine, without giving Marrevel time to answer, called Monsieur de Nancy, the captain of the guards, and ordered him to conduct Marrevel to the king's army. My God, exclaimed Marrevel as he followed his guide, I have risen to the hierarchy of assassination, from a simple gentleman to a captain, from a captain to an admiral, from an admiral to a king without a crown. Who knows if I shall not someday be a king with a crown? Chapter 31. The hunt. The outrider who had turned aside the bull and who had told the king that the animal had not left the place was not mistaken. Scarcely were the bloodhounds put on the trail before it plunged into the thickets, and from a cluster of thorn bushes drove out the bull which the outrider had recognized by its track. It was a recluse, that is, the strangest kind of animal. It started straight ahead and crossed the road 50 feet from the king, followed only by the bloodhound which had driven it back. The first relay of dogs was at once let loose, 20 in number, which sprang after it. Hunting was Charles' chief passion. Scarcely had the animal crossed the road before he started after it, followed by the Duc d'Alencon and Henry, to whom a sign had indicated that he must not leave Charles. The rest of the hunters followed the king. At the time of which we are writing, the royal forests were far from being what they are today, great parks intersected by carriage roads. Then traffic was almost wanting. Kings had not yet conceived the idea of being merchants and of dividing their woods into fellings, copses, and forests. The trees, planted, not by learned foresters, but by the hand of God, who threw the grain to the will of the winds, were not arranged in quincunxes, but grew as they pleased, as they do today in any virginal forest of America. In short, a forest in those days was a den of the wild boar, the stag, the wolf, and robbers, and a dozen paths starting from one point started at Bundy, surrounded by a circular road as the circle of a wheel surrounds its fellies. To carry the comparison further, the nave would not be a bad representation of the single point where the parties meet in the center of the wood, where the wandering hunters rally to start out again towards a point where the lost animal again appears. At the end of a quarter of an hour, there happened what always happens in such cases. Insurmountable obstacles rose in the path of the hunters. The cries of the dogs were lost in the distance, and the king returned to the meeting place cursing and swearing, as was his habit. "Well, d'Alencon, well, Henriot," said he, "there you are, by heaven, as calm and unruffled as nuns following their abbess. That is not hunting. Why, d'Alencon, you look as though you had just stepped out of a bandbox, and you are so saturated with perfumery that if you were to pass between the boar and my dogs, you might put them off the scent. And you, Henry, where is your spear, your musket? Let us see." "Sire," said Henry, "of what use is a musket? I know that your majesty likes to shoot the beast when the dogs have caught it. As to a spear, I am clumsy enough with this weapon, which is not much use among our mountains, where we hunt the bear with a simple dagger. By heavens, Henry, when you return to your Pyrenees, you will have to send me a whole cartload of bays. It must be a pretty hunt that is carried on at such close quarters with an animal which might strangle us. Listen, I think I hear the dogs. No, I am mistaken." The king took his horn and blew a blast. Several horns answered him. Suddenly an outrider appeared who blew another blast. The bull, cried the king. He galloped off, followed by the rest of the hunters who had rallied round him. The outrider was not mistaken. As the king advanced, they began to hear the barking of the pack, which consisted of more than 60 dogs, for one after another they had let loose all the relays placed at the points the boar had already passed. The king saw the boar again, and taking advantage of a clump of high trees, he rushed after him, blowing his horn with all his might. For some time the princes followed him, but the king had such a strong horse and was so carried away by his ardor, and he rode over such rough roads and through such thick underbrush, that first the ladies, then the Duc de Guise and his gentlemen, and finally the two princes, were forced to abandon him. Tavannes held out for a time longer, but at length he too gave up, except Charles and a few outriders who, excited over promised reward, would not leave the king. Everyone had gathered about the open space in the center of the wood. The two princes were together on a narrow path. The Duc de Guise and his gentlemen had halted 100 feet from them. Further on were the ladies. "Does it not really seem," said the Duc d'Alencon to Henry, indicating by a wink the Duc de Guise, that man with his escort sheet and steel is the real king? Poor princes that we are, he does not even honor us by a glance. "Why should he treat us better than we treat our own relatives?" replied Henry. "Why, brother, are not you and I prisoners at the court of France, hostages from our party?" Duc Francois started at these words, and looked at Henry as if to provoke further explanation. But Henry had said more than he usually did, and was silent. "What do you mean, Henry?" asked the Duc Francois, visibly annoyed that his brother-in-law by stopping had left him to open the conversation. "I say, brother," said Henry, "that all these men who are so well armed, whose duty seems to be not to lose sight of us, look exactly like God preventing two people from running away." "Running away? Why? How?" asked d'Alencon, admirably successful in his pretended surprise and innocence. "You have a magnificent mount, Francois," said Henry, following out his thoughts, while apparently changing the conversation. I am sure he can make 7 leagues in an hour, and 20 between now and noon. It is a fine day, and one feels like saying goodbye. See the beautiful crossroad. Does it not tempt you, Francois? As to me, my spurs burn me. Francois did not reply, but he first turned red and then white. Then he bent his head, as if listening for sound from the hunters. The news from Poland is having its effect, said Henry, and my dear brother-in-law has his plans. He would like me to escape, but I shall not do so by myself. Scarcely had this thought passed through his mind before several new converts, who had come to court during the past 2 or 3 months, galloped up and smiled pleasantly on the 2 princes. The Duc d'Alencon, provoked by Henry's remarks, had but one word to say, one gesture to make, and it was evident that 30 or 40 horsemen, who at that moment gathered around him as though to oppose a troop belonging to Monsieur de Guise, favored his flight. But he turned aside his head, and, raising his horn to his lips, he sounded the rally. But the newcomers, as if they thought that the hesitation on the part of the Duc d'Alencon was due to the presence of the followers of the de Guises, had by degrees glided among them and the 2 princes, and had drawn themselves up in echelons with a strategic skill which showed the usual military disposition. In fact, to reach the Duc d'Alencon and the King of Navarre, it would have been necessary to pass through this company, while, as far as I could reach, a perfectly free road stretched out before the brothers. Suddenly from among the trees, 10 feet from the King of Navarre, another gentleman appeared, as yet unperceived by the 2 princes. Henry was trying to think who he was, when the gentleman raised his hat and Henry recognized him as the Vicomte de Turin, one of the leaders of the Protestant party, who was supposed to be in Poitou. The Vicomte even ventured to make a sign which clearly meant, "Will you come?" But having consulted the impassible face and dull eye of the Duc d'Alencon, Henry turned his head 2 or 3 times over his shoulder, as if something was the matter with his neck or doublet. This was a refusal. The Vicomte understood it, put both spurs to his horse, and disappeared in the thicket. At that moment the pack was heard approaching. Then they saw the bull followed by the dogs cross the end of the path where they were all gathered. Then Charles IX, like an infernal hunter, hatless, the horn in his mouth blowing enough to burst his lungs. 3 or 4 outriders followed. Tavannes had disappeared. "The king!" cried the Duc d'Alencon, and he rode after him. Reassured by the presence of his good friends, Henry signed to them not to leave, and advanced towards the ladies. "Well," said Marguerite, taking a few steps towards him. "Well, madam," said Henry, "we are hunting the wild boar." "Is that all?" "Yes. The wind has changed since morning, but I believe you predicted this. These changes of the wind are bad for hunting, are they not, monsieur?" asked Marguerite. "Yes," said Henry. "They sometimes upset all plans, which have to be made over again." Just then the barking of the dogs began to be heard as they rapidly approached, and a sort of noisy dust warned the hunters to be on their guard. Each one raised his head and listened. Almost immediately the boar appeared again, but instead of returning to the woods, he followed the road that led directly to the open space where were the ladies, the gentlemen paying court to them, and the hunters who had given up the chase. Behind the animal came 30 or 40 great dogs, panting. Then, 20 feet behind them, King Charles without hat or cloak, his clothes torn by the thorns, his face and hands covered with blood. 1 or 2 outriders were with him. The king stopped blowing his horn only to urge on his dogs, and stopped urging on his dogs only to return to his horn. He saw no one. Had his horse stumbled, he might have cried out as did Richard III, "My kingdom for a horse!" But the horse seemed as eager as his master. His feet did not touch the ground, and his nostrils breathed forth fire. Boar, dogs, and king passed like a dream. "Halloo! Halloo!" cried the king as he went by, raising the horn to his bloody lips. A few feet behind him came the Duc d'Alencon and 2 outriders, but the horses of the others had given out, or else they were lost. Everyone started after the king, for it was evident that the bull would soon be taken. In fact, at the end of about 10 minutes, the animal left the path it had been following and sprang into the bushes, but reaching an open space, it ran to a rock and faced the dogs. At the shouts from Charles, who had followed it, everyone drew near. They arrived at an interesting point in the chase. The boar seemed determined to make a desperate defense. The dogs, excited by a run of more than 3 hours, rushed on it with a fury which increased the shouts and the oaths of the king. All the hunters formed a circle, the king somewhat in advance. Behind him, the Duc d'Alencon armed with a musket, and Henry, who had nothing but his simple hunting knife. The Duc d'Alencon unfastened his musket and lighted the match. Henry moved his knife in its sheath. As to the Duc de Guise, disdainful of all the details of hunting, he stood somewhat apart from the others with his gentlemen. The women, gathered together in a group, formed a counterpart to that of the Duke. Everyone who was anything of a hunter stood with eyes fixed on the animal in anxious expectation. To one side an outrider was endeavoring to restrain the king's 2 mastiffs, which, encased in their coats of mail, were waiting to take the bull by the ears, howling and jumping about in such a manner that every instant one might think they would burst their chains. In less than 10 minutes, 20 dogs were out of the fight. "The mastiffs!" cried Charles. "The mastiffs!" At this shout, the outrider opened the carbine swivels of the leashes, and the 2 bloodhounds rushed into the midst of the carnage, overturning everything, scattering everything, making away with their coats of mail to the animal, which they seized by the ear. The boar, knowing that it was caught, clenched its teeth both from rage and pain. "Bravo, Judent! Bravo, Risquetute!" cried Charles. "Courage, dogs! A spear! A spear!" "Do you not want my musket?" said the Duc d'Alencon. "No," cried the king. "No, one cannot feel a bullet when he shoots. There is no fun in it, but one can feel a spear. A spear! A spear!" They handed the king a hunting spear hardened by fire and armed with a steel point. "Take care, brother!" cried Marguerite. "Come, come!" cried the Duchesse de Nevers. "Do not miss, sire. Give the beast a good stab." "Be easy, Duchess," said Charles, couching his lance. He darted at the bull which, held by the 2 bloodhounds, could not escape the blow. But at sight of a shining lance it turned to one side, and the weapon, instead of sinking into its breast, glided over its shoulder and blunted itself against the rock to which the animal had run. "A thousand devils!" cried the king. "I have missed him. A spear! A spear!" And bending back, as horsemen do when they are going to take offense, he hurled his useless lance from him. An outrider advanced and offered him another. But at that moment, as though it foresaw the fate which awaited it, and which it wished to resist, by a violent effort the boar snatched its torn ears from the teeth of the bloodhounds, and with eyes bloody, protruding, hideous, its breath burning like the heat from a furnace, with chattering teeth and lowered head it sprang at the king's horse. Charles was too good a hunter not to have foreseen this. He turned his horse, which began to rear, but he had miscalculated the pressure, and the horse, too tightly reined in, or perhaps giving way to his fright, fell over backwards. The spectators gave a terrible cry. The horse had fallen, and the king's leg was under him. "Your hand, sire, give me your hand," said Henry. The king let go his horse's bridle, seized the saddle with his left hand, and tried to draw out his hunting knife with his right. But the knife, pressed into his belt by the weight of his body, would not come from its sheath. The horse, recovering himself as if he understood his master's danger, stretched his muscles, and had already succeeded in getting up on its 3 legs, when, at the cry from his brother, Henry saw the Duc Francois grow frightfully pale and raise a musket to his shoulder. But, instead of striking the ball, which was but 2 feet from the king, the ball broke the knee of the horse, which fell down again, his nose touching the ground. At that instant the ball, with its snout, tore Charles's boot. "Oh," murmured d'Alencon with ashy lips, "I suppose that the Duc d'Anjou is king of France, and that I am king of Poland." The bull was about to attack Charles's leg, when suddenly the latter felt someone raise his arm. Then he saw the flash of a sharp-pointed blade, which was driven into the shoulder of the bull and disappeared up to its guard, while a hand gloved in steel turned aside the head already poked under his clothes. As the horse had risen, Charles had succeeded in freeing his leg, and now raising himself heavily, he saw that he was dripping with blood, whereupon he became as pale as a corpse. "Sire," said Henry, who still knelt holding the ball pierced to the heart. "Sire, it is nothing. I turned aside the teeth, and your majesty is not hurt." Then he rose, let go the knife, and the bull fell back, pouring forth more blood from its mouth than from its wound. Charles, surrounded by a breathless crowd, assailed by cries of terror which would have dashed the greatest courage, was for a moment ready to fall on the dying animal. But he recovered himself, and, turning toward the King of Navarre, he pressed his hand with a look in which shone the first spark of feeling that had been roused in his heart for 24 years. "Thank you, Henriot," said he. "My poor brother," cried d'Alencon, approaching Charles. "Ah, it is you, d'Alencon, is it?" said the king. "Well, famous marksman that you are, what became of your ball?" "It must have flattened itself against the ball," said the duke. "Well, my God!" exclaimed Henry, with admirably assumed surprise. "You see, Francois, your bullet has broken the leg of His Majesty's horse. That is strange." "What?" said the king. "Is that true?" "It is possible," said the duke, terrified. "My hand shook so." "The fact is that for a clever marksman that was a strange thing to do, Francois," said Charles, frowning. "A second time, Henriot, I thank you." "Gentlemen," continued the king, "let us return to Paris. I have had enough of this." Marguerite came up to congratulate Henry. "Yes, indeed, Margot," said Charles. "Congratulate him, and sincerely too, for without him the King of France will be Henry III." "Alas, madam," said the Benet, "Monsieur le Duc d'Anjou, who is already my enemy, will be angrier than ever at me. But what can you expect? One does what one can. Ask Monsieur d'Alencon." And bowing, he drew his knife from the wild boar's body and dug it 2 or 3 times into the earth to wipe off the blood. Part 2, Chapter 32. Fraternity. In saving the life of Charles, Henry had done more than save the life of a man. He had prevented 3 kingdoms from changing sovereigns. Had Charles IX been killed, the Duc d'Anjou would have become King of France, and the Duc d'Alencon in all probability would have been King of Poland. As to Navarre, as Monsieur le Duc d'Anjou was the lover of Madame de Condé, its crown would probably have paid to the husband the complacency of his wife. Now in all this no good would have come to Henry. He would have changed masters, that would have been all. Instead of Charles IX, who tolerated him, he would have seen the Duc d'Anjou on the throne of France, and being of one heart and mind with his mother Catherine, the latter had sworn that he should die, and he would not have failed to keep his oath. All these thoughts entered his mind when the wild boar sprang at Charles IX, and we know that the result of his rapid thinking was that his own life was attached to that of Charles IX. Charles IX had been saved by an act of devotion, the motive of which the king could not fathom. But Marguerite had understood, and she had admired that strange courage of Henry which, like flashes of lightning, shone only in a storm. Unfortunately, it was not all to have escaped the kingdom of the Duc d'Anjou. Henry had to make himself king. He had to dispute Navarre with the Duc d'Alencon and with the Prince of Condé. Above all, he had to leave the court where one walked only between 2 precipices, and go away protected by a son of France. As he returned from Bondy, Henry pondered deeply on the situation. On arriving at the Louvre, his plan was formed. Without removing his riding boots, just as he was, covered with dust and blood, he betook himself to the apartments of the Duc d'Alencon, whom he found striding up and down in great agitation. On perceiving him, the prince gave a start of surprise. "Yes," said Henry, taking him by both hands. "Yes, I understand. My good brother, you are angry because I was the first to call the king's attention to the fact that your ball struck the leg of his horse instead of the ball, as you intended it should. But what can you expect? I could not prevent an exclamation of surprise. Besides, the king would have noticed it, would he not?" No doubt, murmured d'Alencon. "And yet I can think of it only as an evil intention on your part to denounce me as you did, and which, as you yourself saw, had no result except to make my brother Charles suspect me, and to make hard feeling between us. We will return to this in a few moments. As to my good or evil intentions regarding you, I have come to you on purpose that you may judge them." "Very good," said d'Alencon with his customary reserve. "Speak, Henry, I am listening. When I have spoken, Francois, you will readily see what my intentions are, for the confidence I am going to place in you does away with all reserve and prudence. And when I have told you, you will be able to ruin me by a single word. What is it? Said Francois, beginning to be anxious. And yet, continued Henry, I have hesitated a long time to speak to you the thing which brings me here, especially after the way in which you turned a deaf ear today. Really, said Francois, growing pale, I do not know what you mean. Henry, brother, your interests are too dear to me not to tell you that the Huguenots have made advances to me. Advances? Said D'Alencon. What advances? One of them, Monsieur de Mouy of St. Phal, the son of the brave de Mouy, assassinated by Marrevel, you know. Yes. Well, he came at the risk of his life to show me that I was in captivity. Ah, indeed? And what did you say to him? Brother, you know that I love Charles dearly. He has saved my life, and the Queen Mother has been like a real mother to me. So I refused all the offers he made me. What were these offers? The Huguenots want to reconstruct the throne of Navarre, and as in reality this throne belongs to me by inheritance, they offered it to me. Yes, and Monsieur de Mouy, instead of the consent he expected to ask for, has received your relinquishment. My formal relinquishment, even in writing. But since, continued Henry, you have repented, brother, interrupted D'Alencon. No, I merely thought I noticed that Monsieur de Mouy had become discontented with me, and was paying his visits elsewhere. Where? Asked Francois quickly. I do not know. At the Prince of Condé's, perhaps. Yes, that might be, said the Duke. Besides, went on Henry, I have positive knowledge as to the leader he has chosen. Francois grew pale. But, continued Henry, the Huguenots are divided among themselves, and de Mouy, brave and loyal as he is, represents only one half of the party. Now this other half, which is not to be scorned, has not given up the hope of having Henry of Navarre on the throne, who having hesitated at first may have reflected since. You think this? Oh, every day I receive proofs of it. The troops which joined us at the hunt. Did you notice of what men it was composed? Yes, of converted gentlemen. Did you recognize the leader of the troop who signed to me? Yes, it was a Vicomte de Turin. Did you know what they wanted of me? Yes, they proposed to you to escape. Then, said Henry de Francois, who was growing restless, there is evidently a second party which wants something else besides what Monsieur de Mouy wants. A second party. Yes, and a very powerful one, I tell you, so that in order to succeed it is necessary to unite the two, Turin and de Mouy. The conspiracy progresses. The troops are ready. The signal alone is waited for. Now in the supreme situation, which demands prompt solution on my part, I have come to two decisions between which I am wavering. I have come to submit these decisions to you as to a friend. Say rather as to a brother. Yes, as to a brother, went on Henry. Speak, then I am listening. In the first place, I ought to explain to you the condition of my mind, my dear Francois. No desire, no ambition, no ability. I am an honest country gentleman, poor, sensual, and timid. The career of conspirator offers me indignities poorly compensated for even by the certain prospect of a crown. Ah, brother, said Francois, you do wrong. Sad indeed is the position of a prince whose fortune is limited by the boundary of the paternal estate, or by a man in a career for honors. I do not believe, therefore, in what you tell me. And yet what I tell you is so true, brother, that if I thought I had a true friend, I would resign in his favor the power which this party wishes to give me. But, he added with a sigh, I have none. Perhaps you have. You probably are mistaken. No, Venter Saint Grace, said Henry. Accept yourself, brother. I see no one who is attached to me, so that rather than let fail an attempt which might bring delight to some unworthy man, I truly prefer to inform my brother the king of what is taking place. I will mention no names. I will designate neither country nor date, but I will foretell the catastrophe. Great God! exclaimed Dalencon, unable to repress his terror. What do you mean? What? You, the sole hope of the party since the death of the Admiral. You, a converted Huguenot, a poor convert, or at least such you were thought to be, you would raise a knife against your brothers. Henry, by doing this, do you know that you would be delivering to a second St. Bartholomew all the Calvinists in the kingdom? Do you know that Catherine is waiting for just such a chance to exterminate all who have survived? And the Duke, trembling, his face spotted with red and white blotches, pressed Henry's hand to beg him to give up this idea which would ruin him. What? Said Henry, with an expression of perfect good humor. Do you think there would be so much trouble, Francois? With the king's word, however, it seems to me that I should avoid it. The word of King Charles IX, Henry, did not the Admiral have it? Did not Tilani have it? Did not you yourself have it? Oh, Henry, I tell you, if you do this, you will ruin us all. Not only them, but all who have had direct or indirect relations with them. Henry seemed to ponder an instant. If I were an important prince at court, said he, I should act differently. In your place. For instance, in your place, Francois, a son of France, and probable heir to the crown. Francois shook his head ironically. In my place, said he, what would you do? In your place, brother, replied Henry, I should place myself at the head of the movement and direct it. My name and my credit should answer to my conscience for the life of the rebellious, and I should derive some benefit first for myself, then for the king, perhaps, from an enterprise which otherwise might do the greatest injury to France. Dalencon listened to these words with a joy which caused every muscle of his face to expand. Do you think, said he, that this method is practicable and that it would save us all the disasters you foresee? I think so, said Henry. The Huguenots love you. Your bearing is modest, your position both high and interesting, and the kindness you have always shown to those of the faith will incline them to serve you. But, said Dalencon, there is a division in the party. Will those who want you want me? I will undertake to bring them together by two means. What means? First, by the confidence the leaders have in me, then by the fear that your highness, knowing their names. But who will tell me these names? I, Venter St. Grace. You will do that. Listen, Francois, as I told you, you are the only one I love at court, said Henry. This, no doubt, is because you were persecuted like myself, and then my wife, too, loves you with an affection which is unequaled. Francois flushed with pleasure. Believe me, brother, continued Henry, take this thing in hand, reign in Navarre, and provided you keep a place at your table for me, and a fine forest in which to hunt, I shall consider myself fortunate. Reign in Navarre, said the Duke, but if the Duc d'Anjou is chosen King of Poland, is that it? I will finish your thought for you. Francois looked at Henry with something like terror. Well, listen, Francois, continued Henry, since nothing escapes you. This is how I reason. If the Duc d'Anjou is chosen King of Poland, and our brother Charles, God keep him, should happen to die, it is but 200 leagues from Pau to Paris, while it is 400 from Paris to Cracovie. So you would be here to receive the inheritance by the time the King of Poland learned it was vacant. Then, if you are satisfied with me, you could give me the kingdom of Navarre, which would thenceforth be merely one of the jewels in your crown. In that way I would accept it. The worst that could happen to you would be that you would remain king there and bring up a race of kings by living with me and my family, while here, what are you? A poor persecuted prince, a poor third son of a king, the slave of 2 elder brothers, and one whom a whim may send to the Bastille. Yes, said Francois. I know that very well, so well that I do not see why you should give up this plan you propose to me. Is there no throb there? And the Duc d'Alençon put his hand on his brother's heart. There, said Henry, smiling, burden's too heavy for some hands. Therefore I shall not try to raise this one. Fear fatigue is greater than the desire of possession. So, Henry, you really renounce it. I said so to Demouy, and I repeat it to you. But in such cases, my dear brother, said d'Alencon. One does not say, one proves. Henry breathed like a pugilist who feels his enemy's back bending. I will prove it this evening, said he. At 9 o'clock we shall have the names of the leaders and the plan of the undertaking. I have already sent my renunciation to Demouy. Francois took Henry's hand and pressed it effusively between his own. At that moment Catherine entered the Duc d'Alencon's rooms, unannounced, as was her habit. Together, said she, smiling, two good brothers, truly. I trust so, madam, said Henry, with great coolness, while the Duc d'Alencon turned white from distress. Henry stepped back to leave Catherine free to speak with her son. The Queen Mother drew a magnificent jewel from her bag. This clasp comes from Florence, said she. I will give it to you for the belt of your sword. Then in a low tone, if tonight you hear any noise in your good brother Henry's room, do not stir. Francois pressed his mother's hand and said, Will you allow me to show Henry the beautiful gift you have just given me? You may do more. Give it to him in your name and in mine, for I have ordered a second one just like it. You hear, Henry, said Francois. My good mother brings me this jewel and doubles its value by allowing me to give it to you. Henry went into ecstasies over the beauty of the clasp and was enthusiastic in his thanks, when his delight had grown calmer. My son, said Catherine, I feel somewhat indisposed and I am going to bed. Your brother Charles is greatly wearied from his fall and is going to do the same. So we shall not have supper together this evening, but each will be served in his own room. Oh, Henry, I forgot to congratulate you on your bravery and quickness. You saved your king and your brother, and you shall be rewarded for it. I'm already rewarded, madam, replied Henry, bowing. By the feeling that you have done your duty, replied Catherine. That is not enough, and Charles and I will do something to pay the debt we owe you. Everything that comes to me from you and my good brother will be welcome, madam. Then he bowed and withdrew. Ah, brother Francois, thought Henry as he left. I am sure now of not leaving alone, and the conspiracy which a body has found a head and a heart. Only let us look out for ourselves. Catherine gives me a present. Catherine promises me a reward. There is some deviltry beneath it all. I must confer this evening with Marguerite. Chapter 33. The Gratitude of King Charles IX. Marguerite had spent a part of the day in the king's army, but when it was time for the hunters to return from the chase, Catherine sent him into her oratory with the guards who had joined him. Charles IX, informed by his nurse on his arrival that a man had spent part of the day in his room, was at first very angry that a stranger had been admitted into his apartments. But his nurse described the man, saying that he was the same one she herself had been ordered to admit one evening. And the king realized that it was Marguerite. Then, remembering the order his mother had wrung from him that morning, he understood everything. Oh, ho, murmured Charles, the same day on which he has saved my life. The time is badly chosen. He started to go to his mother, but one thought deterred him. Nurse, said he, lock every door, and say to Queen Elizabeth that I am suffering somewhat from the fall I have had, and that I shall sleep alone tonight. The nurse obeyed, and as it was not yet time for the execution of his plan, Charles set himself down to compose poetry. It was this occupation which made the time pass most quickly for the king. 9 o'clock struck before he thought it was more than 7. He counted the strokes of the clock one by one, and at the last he rose. The devil, said he, it is just time. Taking his hat and cloak, he left his room by a secret door he had made in the wall, the existence of which even Catherine herself was ignorant. Charles went directly to Henry's apartments. On leaving the Duc d'Alencon, the latter had gone to his room to change his clothes and had left again at once. He probably has decided to take supper with Margot, said the king. He was very pleasant with her today, at least so it seemed to me. He went to the queen's apartments. Marguerite had brought back with her the Duchesse de Nevers, Coconnas, and La Mole, and was having a supper of preserves and pastry with them. Charles knocked at the hall door, which was opened by Galon. But at sight of the king she was so frightened that she scarcely had sufficient presence of mind to courtesy, and instead of running to inform her mistress of the august visit she was to have, She let Charles enter without other warning than the cry that had escaped her. The king crossed the antechamber, and guided by the bursts of laughter advanced towards the dining room. "Poor Henriette," said he is enjoying himself without a thought of evil. "It is I," said he, raising the portiere and showing a smiling face. Marguerite gave a terrible cry. Smiling as he was, his face appeared to her like the face of Medusa. Seated opposite the door, she had recognized him at once. The two men turned their backs to the king. "Your Majesty," cried the queen, rising in terror. The three other guests felt their heads begin to swim. Coconnas alone retained his self-possession. He rose also, but with such tactful clumsiness that in doing so he upset the table, and with it the glass, plate, and candles. Instantly there was complete darkness and the silence of death. "Run," said Coconnas to La Mole. "Quick, quick." La Mole did not wait to be told twice. Springing to the side of the wall, he began groping with his hands to the sleeping room, that he might hide in the cabinet that opened out of it, and which he knew so well. But as he stepped across the threshold, he ran against a man who had just entered by the secret corridor. "What does all this mean?" asked Charles, in the darkness, in a tone which was beginning to betray a formidable accent of impatience. "Am I such a Marjoy that the sight of me causes all this confusion? Come, Henriette. Henriette, where are you? Answer me." "We are saved," murmured Marguerite, seizing a hand which he took for that of La Mole. "The king thinks my husband is one of our guests, and I shall let him think so, madam, you may be sure," said Henry, answering the queen in the same tone. "Great God!" cried Marguerite, hastily dropping the hand she held, which was that of the King of Navarre. "Silence," said Henry. "In the name of 1,000 devils. Why are you whispering in this way?" cried Charles. "Henry, answer me. Where are you?" "Hey, sire," said the King of Navarre. "The devil," said Coconnas, who was holding the Duchesse de Nevers in a corner. "The plot thickens." "In that case we are doubly lost," said Henriette. Coconnas, brave to the point of rashness, had reflected that the candles would have to be lighted sooner or later, and thinking the sooner the better, he dropped the hand of Madame de Nevers, picked up a taper from the midst of the debris, and going to a brazier blew on a piece of coal, with which he at once made a light. The chamber was again illuminated. Charles IX glanced around inquiringly. Henry was by the side of his wife. The Duchesse de Nevers was alone in a corner, while Coconnas stood in the center of the room, candlestick in hand, lighting up the whole scene. "Excuse me, brother," said Marguerite. "We were not expecting you. So, as you may have perceived, your Majesty filled us with strange terror," said Henriette. "For my part," said Henry, who had surmised everything, "I think the fear was so real that in rising I overturned the table." Coconnas glanced at the King of Navarre as much as to say, "Good, here is a man who understands at once." "What a frightful hubbub," repeated Charles IX. "Your supper is ruined. Henriette, come with me and you shall finish it elsewhere. I will carry you off this evening." "What, sire?" said Henry. "Your Majesty will do me the honor." "Yes, my Majesty will do the honor of taking you away from the Louvre. Lend him to me. Margot, I will bring him back to you tomorrow morning." "Aye, brother," said Marguerite. "You do not need my permission for that. You are master." "Sire," said Henry, "I will get another cloak from my room and will return immediately." "You do not need it. Henriette, the cloak you have is all right." "But, sire," began the Benet, "in the name of 1,000 devils, I tell you not to go to your rooms. Do you not hear what I say? Come along." "Yes, yes, go," said Marguerite, suddenly pressing her husband's arm, for a singular look from Charles had convinced her that something unusual was going on. "Here I am, sire," said Henry. Charles looked at Coconnas, who was still carrying out his office of torchbearer by lighting the other candles. "Who is this gentleman?" asked the King of Henry, eyeing the Piedmontese from head to foot. "Is he Monsieur de la Mole?" "Who has told him of La Mole?" asked Marguerite in a low tone. "No, sire," replied Henry. "Monsieur de la Mole is not here. I regret to say. Otherwise, I should have the honor of presenting him to your majesty at the same time as Monsieur de Coconnas, his friend. They are perfectly inseparable, and both are in the suite of Monsieur d'Alencon. Ah, ah, our famous marksman, said Charles. Good. Then frowning, is not this Monsieur de la Mole a Huguenot? He asked. He is converted, sire, and I will answer for him as for myself. When you answer for anyone, Henriette, after what you did today, I have no further right to doubt him, but I should have liked to see this Monsieur de la Mole. However, I can meet him another time. Giving a last glance about the room, Charles embraced Marguerite, took hold of the arm of the King of Navarre, and led him off. At the gate of the Louvre, Henry wanted to speak to someone. Come, pass out quickly, Henriette, said Charles, when I tell you that the air of the Louvre is not good for you this evening. The devil, you must believe me. Venter Saint Grace, murmured Henry, and what will Demouy do all alone in my room? I trust the air which is not good for me may be no worse for him. Ah! Exclaimed the king, when Henry and he had crossed the drawbridge. Does it suit you, Henry, to have a gentleman of Monsieur d'Alencon courting your wife? How so, sire? Truly, is not this Monsieur de Coconnas making eyes at Margot? Who told you that? Well, said the king, I heard it. A mere joke, sire. Monsieur de Coconnas does make eyes at someone, but it is at Madame de Nevis. Ah, bah! I can answer to your majesty for what I tell you. Charles burst into laughter. Well, said he, let the Duc de Guise come to me again with his gossip, and I will gently pull his mustache by telling him of the exploits of his sister-in-law. But after all, said the king, thinking better of it, I do not know whether it was Monsieur de Coconnas or Monsieur de la Mole he referred to. Neither the one more than the other, sire, and I can answer to you for the feelings of my wife. Good, Henriette, good, said the king. I like you better now than the way you were before. On my honor, you are such a good fellow that I shall end by being unable to get along without you. As he spoke, the king gave a peculiar whistle, whereupon 4 gentlemen who were waiting for him at the end of the Rue de Beauvais joined him. The whole party set out towards the middle of the city. 10 o'clock struck. Well, said Marguerite, after the king and Henry had left, shall we go back to table? Mercy, no, cried the Duchess. I have been too badly frightened. Long live the little house in the Rue Cloche-Percy. No one can enter that without regularly besieging it, and our good men have the right to use their swords there. But what are you looking for under the furniture and in the closets, Monsieur de Coconnas? I am trying to find my friend La Mole, said the Piedmontese. Look in my room, monsieur, said Marguerite. There's a certain closet. Very well, said Coconnas. I will go there. He entered the room. Well, said a voice from the darkness, where are we? And the King of Navarre. He has seen nothing. He is a perfect husband, and I wish my wife had one like him. But I fear she never will, even if she marries again. And King Charles. Really, it is as I tell you. Furthermore, he honored me by looking askance at me when he discovered that I belonged to Monsieur d'Alencon, and cross when he found out that I was your friend. You think, then, that he has heard me spoken of. I fear that he has heard nothing very good of you. But that is not the point. I believe these ladies have a pilgrimage to make to the Rue du Roi de Sicile, and that we are to take them there. Why? That is impossible. You know that very well. How impossible? We are on duty at His Royal Highness's. By heavens, that is so. I always forget that we are ranked, and that from the gentlemen we have had the honor to pass into valets. Thereupon the 2 friends went and told the Queen and the Duchess the necessity of their being present at least when Monsieur le Duc retired. Very well, said Madame de Nevis, we will go by ourselves. Might we know where you are going? Asked Coconnas. Oh, you are too curious, said the Duchess. Que et invenies. The young men bowed and went at once to Monsieur d'Alencon. The Duke seemed to be waiting for them in his cabinet. Ah! said he. "You are very late, gentlemen." "It is scarcely 10 o'clock, Monseigneur," said Coconnas. The Duke drew out his watch. "That is true," said he, "and yet every one has gone to sleep in the Louvre." "Yes, monsieur, but we are here at your orders. Must we admit into the chamber of your highness the gentlemen who are with the king until he retires? On the contrary, go into the small reception room and dismiss everyone." The young men obeyed, carried out the order, which surprised no one because of the well-known character of the Duke, and returned to him. "Monseigneur," said Coconnas, "your highness will probably either go to bed or work, will you not?" "No. Gentlemen, you may have leave of absence until tomorrow." Well, whispered Coconnas into La Mole's ear, "the court is going to stay up all night, apparently. It will be devilishly pleasant. Let us have our share of it." And both young men descended the stairs 4 steps at a time, took their cloaks and their night swords, and hastily left the Louvre after the 2 ladies, whom they overtook at the corner of the Rue du Coq Saint-Honor. Meanwhile, the Duc d'Alencon, with open eyes and ears, locked himself in his room to await the unexpected events he had been promised. Chapter 34. Man proposes, but God disposes. As the Duke had said to the young men, the most profound silence reigned in the Louvre. Marguerite and Madame de Nevers had departed for the Rue Tizon. Coconnas and La Mole had followed them. The king and Henry were knocking about the city. The Duc d'Alencon was in his room vaguely and anxiously waiting for the events which the Queen Mother had predicted. Catherine had gone to bed, and Madame de Sauve, seated by her, was reading some Italian stories which greatly amused the good queen. Catherine had not been in such good humor for a long time. Having done justice to a collation with the ladies in waiting, having consulted her physician and arranged the daily accounts of her household, she had ordered prayers for the success of a certain enterprise, which she said was of great importance to the happiness of her children. Under certain circumstances, it was Catherine's habit, a habit, for that matter, wholly Florentine, to have prayers and masses read, the object of which was known only to God and herself. Finally, she had seen Renée, and had chosen several novelties from among her rich collection of perfume bags. "Let me know," said Catherine, "if my daughter the Queen of Navarre is in her rooms, and if she is there, beg her to come to me." The page to whom this order was given withdrew, and an instant later he returned, accompanied by Guillaume. "Well," said the Queen Mother, "I asked for the mistress, not the servant." "Madam," said Guillaume, "I thought I ought to come myself and tell your Majesty that the Queen of Navarre has gone out with her friend the Duchesse de Nevers." "Gone out at this hour?" exclaimed Catherine, frowning. "Where can she have gone?" "To a lecture on chemistry," replied Guillaume, "which is to be held in the Hôtel de Guise, in the pavilion occupied by Madame de Nevers." "When will she return?" asked the Queen Mother. "The lecture will last until late into the night," replied Guillaume, "so that probably Her Majesty will stay with her friend until tomorrow morning." "The Queen of Navarre is happy," murmured Catherine. "She has friends and she is queen. She wears a crown, is called Your Majesty, yet has no subjects. She is happy indeed." After this remark, which made her listeners smile inwardly, "Well," murmured Catherine, "since she has gone out, for she has gone, you say?" "Half an hour ago, madam." "Everything is for the best. You may go." Guillaume bowed and left. "Go on with your reading, Charlotte," said the Queen. Madame de Sauve continued. At the end of 10 minutes, Catherine interrupted the story. "Ah, by the way," said she, "have the guards dismissed from the corridor?" This was the signal for which Mareville was waiting. The order of the Queen Mother was carried out, and Madame de Sauve went on with the story. She had read for about a quarter of an hour without any interruption, when a prolonged and terrible scream reached the royal chamber, and made the hair of those present stand on end. The scream was followed by the sound of a pistol shot. "What is it?" said Catherine. "Why do you stop reading, Carlotta?" "Madam," said the young woman, turning pale, "did you not hear?" "What?" asked Catherine. "That cry." "And that pistol shot?" added the captain of the guards. "A cry, a pistol shot?" asked Catherine. "I heard nothing." Besides, is a shout or a pistol shot such a very unusual thing at the Louvre? Read, call order. But listen, madam, said the latter, while Monsieur de Nancy stood up, his hand on his sword, but not daring to leave without permission from the Queen. Listen, I hear steps, curses. Shall I go and find out about it? Madam, said de Nancy. Not at all, monsieur. Stay where you are, said Catherine, raising herself on one hand to give more emphasis to her order. Who, then, would protect me in case of an alarm? It is only some drunken Swiss fighting. The calmness of the Queen, contrasted with the terror on the faces of all present, was so remarkable that, timid as she was, Madame de Sauve fixed a questioning glance on the Queen. Why, madam, I should think they were killing someone. Whom do you think they are killing? The King of Navarre, madam. The noise comes from the direction of his apartments. The fool, murmured the Queen, whose lips, in spite of her self-control, were beginning to move strangely, for she was muttering a prayer. The fool sees a King of Navarre everywhere. My God, cried Madame de Sauve, falling back in her chair. It is over, said Catherine. Captain, she continued, turning to Monsieur de Nancy, I hope if there is any scandal in the palace, you will have the guilty one severely punished tomorrow. Go on with your reading. Call order. And Catherine sank back on a pillow with a calmness that greatly resembled weakness, for those present noticed great drops of perspiration rolling down her face. Madame de Sauve obeyed this formal order, but her eyes and her voice were mere machines. Her thoughts wandered to other things which represented a terrible danger hanging over a loved head. Finally, after struggling on for several minutes, she became so oppressed between her feelings and etiquette that her words became unintelligible. The book fell from her hands, and she fainted. Suddenly a louder noise was heard. A quick, heavy step fell in the corridor. 2 pistol shots shook the windows, and Catherine, astonished at the interminable struggle, rose in terror, erect, pale, with dilating eyes. As the captain of the guard was about to hurry out, she stopped him, saying, Let everyone remain here. I myself will go and see what is the matter. This is what was taking place, or rather what had taken place. That morning de Mouy had received the key of Henry's room from the hands of Orhan. In this key, which was piped, he had noticed a roll of paper. He drew it out with a pen. It was the password of the Louvre for that night. Besides, Orhan had verbally transmitted to him the words of Henry, asking de Mouy to come to the king at 10 o'clock in the Louvre. At 9:30, de Mouy put on a suit of armor, the strength of which he had already more than once had occasion to test. Over this he buttoned a silk doublet, fastened on his sword, put his pistols in his belt, and over everything threw the red cloak of La Mole. We have seen how, before going back to his rooms, Henry had thought best to pay a visit to Marguerite, and how he arrived by the secret stairway just in time to run against La Mole in Marguerite's sleeping room, and to appear in the dining room before the king. It was at that very moment when, thanks to the password sent by Henry, and above all to the famous red cloak, that de Mouy passed under the gate of the Louvre. The young man went directly to the apartments of the King of Navarre, imitating as well as he could, as was his habit, the gait of La Mole. He found Orhan waiting for him in the antechamber. Sire de Mouy, said the mountaineer, the king has gone out, but he told me to admit you and to tell you to wait for him. If he should be late in returning, he wants you, you know, to lie down on his bed. De Mouy entered without asking for further explanation, for what Orhan had just told him was only the repetition of what he had already heard that morning. In order to pass away the time, he took a pen and ink and, approaching a fine map of France which hung on the wall, he set to work to count and determine the stopping places between Paris and Pau. But this was only the work of a quarter of an hour, and then de Mouy did not know what to do. He made 2 or 3 rounds of the room, rubbed his eyes, yawned, sat down, got up, and sat down again. Finally, taking advantage of Henry's invitation and the familiarity which existed between princes and their gentlemen, he placed his pistols and the lamp on a table, stretched himself out on the great bed with the somber hangings which furnished the rear of the room, laid his sword by his side, and, sure of not being surprised since a servant was in the adjoining room, he fell into a pleasant sleep. the noise of which soon made the vast canopy ring with its echoes. Dumas snored like a regular old soldier, and in this he could have vied with the King of Navarre himself. It was then that 6 men, their swords in their hands and their knives at their belts, glided silently into the corridor which communicated by a small door with the apartments of Catherine and by a large one with those of Henry. One of the 6 men walked ahead of the others. Besides his bare sword and his dagger, which was as strong as a hunting knife, he carried his faithful pistols fastened to his belt by silver hooks. This man was Morival. Having reached Henry's door, he stopped. "Are you perfectly sure that the sentinels are not in the corridor?" he asked of the one who apparently commanded the little band. "Not a single one is at his post," replied the lieutenant. "Very good," said Marrevel. "Now there is nothing further except to find out one thing. That is, if the man we are looking for is in his room." "But," said the lieutenant, arresting the hand which Marrevel had laid on the handle of the door, "but, Captain, these apartments are those of the King of Navarre." "Who said they were not?" asked Marrevel. The guards looked at one another in amazement, and the lieutenant stepped back. "What?" exclaimed he. "Arrest someone at this hour in the Louvre and in the apartments of the King of Navarre?" "What should you say?" said Marrevel, "were I to tell you that the one you are about to arrest is the King of Navarre himself?" "I should say, Captain, that it is serious business, and that without an order signed by King Charles IX." "Read this," said Marrevel, and drawing from his doublet the order which Catherine had given him, he handed it to the lieutenant. "Very well," replied the latter after he had read it. "I have nothing further to say." "And you are ready?" "I am ready." "And you?" continued Marrevel, turning to the other 5 sparrows. They all saluted respectfully. "Listen to me, then, gentlemen," said Marrevel. "This is my plan. 2 of you will remain at this door, 2 at the door of the sleeping room, and 2 will go with me. Afterwards," said the lieutenant, "pay close attention to this. We are ordered to prevent the prisoner from calling out, shouting, or resisting. Any infraction of this order is to be punished by death." "Well, well, he has full permission," said the lieutenant to the man chosen by him to follow Marrevel into the king's room. "Full," said Marrevel. "Poor devil of the King of Navarre," said one of the men. "It was written above that he should not escape this." "And here too," said Marrevel, taking Catherine's order from the hands of the lieutenant and returning it to his breast. Marrevel inserted the key Catherine had given him into the lock, and leaving 2 men at the outer door, as had been agreed on, he entered the antechamber with the 4 others. "Ah, said Marrevel, hearing the noisy breathing of the sleeper, the sound of which reached even as far as that. "It seems that we shall find what we are looking for." Orhan, thinking it was his master returning, at once started up and found himself face to face with 5 armed men in the first chamber. At sight of the sinister face of Marrevel, who was called the King's Slayer, the faithful servant sprang back, and placing himself before the second door, "Who are you?" said he, "and what do you want?" "In the King's name," replied Marrevel, "where is your master?" "My master?" "Yes, the King of Navarre." "The King of Navarre is not in his room," said Orhan, barring the door more than ever, "so you cannot enter." "Excuses, lies," said Marrevel. "Come, stand back." "The Benet people are stubborn." This one growled like one of his own mountain dogs, and far from being intimidated. "You shall not enter," said he. "The king is out." And he clung to the door. Marrevel made a sign. The 4 men seized the stubborn servant, snatched him from a door-sill to which he was clinging, and as he started to open his mouth and cry out, Marrevel clapped a hand to his lips. Orhan bit furiously at the assassin, who dropped his hand with a dull cry, and brought down the handle of his sword on the head of the servant. Orhan staggered and fell back, shouting, "Help! Help! Help!" Then his voice died away. He had fainted. The assassin stepped over his body. 2 stopped at the second door, and 2 entered the sleeping room with Marrevel. In the glow of the lamp burning on the night table, they saw the bed. The curtains were drawn. "Oh, oh," said the lieutenant. "He has stopped snoring, apparently." "Be quick!" cried Maurevel. At this, a sharp cry, resembling the roar of a lion rather than a human voice, came from behind the curtains, which were violently thrown back, and a man appeared sitting there armed with a cuirass, his head covered with a helmet which reached to his eyes. 2 pistols were in his hand, and his sword lay across his knees. No sooner did Maurevel perceive this figure and recognize Demouy than he felt his hair rise on end. He became frightfully pale, foam sprang to his lips, and he stepped back as if he had come face to face with a ghost. Suddenly the armed figure rose and stepped forward as Maurevel drew back, so that from the position of threatener, the latter now became the one threatened, and vice versa. "Ow! Scoundrel!" cried Demouy in a dull voice. "So you have come to murder me as you murdered my father." The 2 guards who had entered the room with Maurevel alone heard these terrible words. As they were uttered, a pistol was placed to Morvel's forehead. The latter sank to his knees just as Demouy put his hand on the trigger. The shot was fired, and one of the guard who stood behind him and whom he had unmasked by this movement dropped to the floor, struck to the heart. At the same instant Maurevel fired back, but the ball glanced off Demouy's cuirass. Then, measuring the distance, Demouy sprang forward and with the edge of his broadsword split open the head of the second guard, and turning towards Maurevel crossed swords with him. The struggle was brief but terrible. At the 4th pass Maurevel felt the cold steel in his throat. He uttered a stifled cry and fell backwards, upsetting the lamp, which went out in the fall. At once Demouy, strong and agile as one of Homer's heroes, took advantage of the darkness and sprang, with head lowered, into the antechamber, knocked down one guard, pushed aside the other, and shot like an arrow between those of the outer door. He escaped 2 pistol shots, the balls of which grazed the wall of the corridor, and from that moment was safe, for 1 loaded pistol still was left him, besides the sword which had dealt such terrible blows. For an instant he hesitated, undecided whether to go to Monsieur d'Alencon's, the door of whose room he thought had just opened, or to try and escape from the Louvre. He determined on the latter course, continued on his way, slow at first, jumped 10 steps at a time, and reaching the gate uttered the 2 passwords and rushed on, shouting out, "Go upstairs. There is murder going on by order of the king." Taking advantage of the amazement produced on the sentinel by his words and the sound of the pistol shots, he ran on and disappeared in the Rue du Coq without having received a scratch. It was at this moment that Catherine stopped the captain of the guards, saying, "Stay here. I myself will go and see what is the matter." "But, madam," replied the captain, "the danger your majesty runs compels me to follow you." "Stay here, monsieur," said Catherine, in a still more imperious tone. "Stay here. There is a more powerful protection around kings than the human sword." The captain remained where he was. Taking a lamp, Catherine slipped her bare feet into a pair of velvet slippers, left her room, and reaching the corridor, still full of smoke, advanced as impassable and as cold as a shadow towards the apartments of the King of Navarre. Silence reigned supreme. Catherine reached the door, crossed the threshold, and first saw Orthon, who had fainted in the antechamber. "Ow," said she, "here is a servant. Further on we shall probably find the master." She entered the second door. Then her foot ran against a corpse. She lowered her lamp. It was a guard who had had his head split open. He was quite dead. A few feet further on the lieutenant, who had been struck by a bullet, was drawing his last breath. Finally, before the bed lay a man whose face was as pale as death and who was bleeding from a double wound in his throat. He was clenching his hands convulsively in his efforts to rise. It was Maurevel. Catherine shuddered. She saw the empty bed. She looked around the room, seeking in vain for the body she hoped to find among the 3 corpses. Maurevel recognized Catherine. His eyes were horribly dilated, and he made a despairing gesture towards her. "Well," said she in a whisper, "where is he? What has happened? Unfortunate man. Have you let him escape?" Maurevel strove to speak, but an unintelligible sound came from his throat, a bloody foam covered his lips, and he shook his head in sign of inability and pain. "Speak," cried Catherine. "Speak, if only one word." Maurevel pointed to his wound, again made several inarticulate gasps, which ended in a hoarse rattle, and fainted. Catherine looked around her. She was surrounded by the bodies of dead and dying. Blood flowed in every direction, and the silence of death hovered over everything. Once again she spoke to Marrevel, but failed to rouse him. He was not only silent but motionless. A paper was in his doublet. It was the order of arrest signed by the king. Catherine seized it and hid it in her breast. Just then she heard a light step behind her, and turning, she saw the Duc d'Alencon at the door. In spite of himself, he had been drawn thither by the noise, and the sight before him fascinated him. "You hear?" said she. "Yes, madam. For God's sake, what has happened?" "Go back to your room. Francois, you will know soon enough." D'Alencon was not as ignorant of the affair as Catherine supposed. At the sound of the first steps in the corridor, he had listened, seeing some men enter the apartments of the King of Navarre, and by connecting this with some words Catherine had uttered, he had guessed what was about to take place, and was rejoiced at having so dangerous an enemy destroyed by a hand stronger than his own. Before long, the noises of pistol shots and the rapid steps of a man running had attracted his attention, and he had seen disappearing in the light space caused by the opening of the door leading to the stairway the red cloak too well known not to be recognized. "De Maui," he cried, "de Maui in the apartments of the King of Navarre. Why, that is impossible. Can it be Monsieur de la Mole?" He grew alarmed, remembering that the young man had been recommended to him by Marguerite herself, and wishing to make sure that it was he whom he had just seen. He ascended hurriedly to the chamber of the two young men. It was vacant, but in a corner he found the famous red cloak hanging against the wall. His suspicions were confirmed. It was not La Mole, but de Mouy, pale and trembling lest the Huguenot should be discovered, and would betray the secrets of the conspiracy. He rushed to the gate of the Louvre. There he was told that the red cloak had escaped safe and sound, shouting out as he passed that someone was being murdered in the Louvre by order of the king. "He is mistaken," murmured D'Alencon. "It is by order of the Queen Mother." Returning to the scene of combat, he found Catherine wandering like a hyena among the dead. At the order from his mother, the young man returned to his rooms, affecting calmness and obedience, in spite of the tumultuous thoughts which were passing through his mind. In despair at the failure of this new attempt, Catherine called the captain of the guards, had the bodies removed, gave orders that Marrevel, who was only wounded, be carried to his home, and told them not to waken the king. "Oh," she murmured, as she returned to her rooms, her head sunk on her bosom, "he has again escaped. The hand of God is over this man. He will reign. He will reign." Entering her room, she passed her hand across her brow and assumed an ordinary smile. "What was the matter, madam?" asked everyone except Madame de Sauve, who was too frightened to ask any questions. "Nothing," replied Catherine. "A noise, that was all." "Oh," cried Madame de Sauve, suddenly pointing to the floor. "Your Majesty says there is nothing the matter, and every one of your Majesty's steps leaves a trace of blood on the carpet." Chapter 35. A Night of Kings. Charles IX. walked along with Henry leaning on his arm, followed by his 4 gentlemen and preceded by 2 torch-bearers. "When I leave the Louvre," said the poor king, "I feel a pleasure similar to that which comes to me when I enter a beautiful forest. I breathe, I live, I am free." Henry smiled. "In that case," said he, "your Majesty would be in your element among the mountains of the Beaune." "Yes, and I understand that you want to go back to them, but if you are very anxious to do so, Henriette," added Charles, laughing, "my advice is to be careful, for my mother Catherine loves you so dearly that it is absolutely impossible for her to get along without you." "What does your Majesty plan to do this evening?" asked Henry, changing this dangerous conversation. "I want to have you meet someone, Henriette, and you shall give me your opinion." "I am at your Majesty's orders." "To the right, to the right. We will take the Rue des Barras." The 2 kings, followed by their escort, had passed the Rue de la Savonnerie, when in front of the Hôtel de Condé they saw 2 men, wrapped in large cloaks, coming out of a secret door which one of them noiselessly closed behind him. "Oh, oh," said the king to Henry, who as usual had seen everything, but had not spoken. "This deserves attention." "Why do you say that, sire?" asked the King of Navarre. "It is not on your account. Henriette, you are sure of your wife, added Charles with a smile. But your cousin de Condé is not sure of his, or if so, he is making a mistake, the devil. But how do you know, sire, that it is Madame de Condé whom these gentlemen have been visiting? Instinct tells me. The fact that the men stood in the doorway without moving until they saw us, then the cut of the shorter one's cloak. By heaven, that would be strange. What? Nothing. An idea I had. That is all. Let us go on. He walked up to the two men, who, seeing him, started to walk away. Hello, gentlemen, cried the king. Stop. Are you speaking to us? Asked a voice which made Charles and his companion tremble. Well, Henriette, said Charles, do you recognize the voice now? Sire, said Henry, if your brother the Duc d'Anjou was not at La Rochelle, I would swear it was he speaking. Well, said Charles, he is not at La Rochelle, that is all. But who is with him? Do you not recognize his companion? No, sire. Yet his figure is unmistakable. Wait, you shall see who he is. Hello, there, I tell you, cried the king, do you not hear, by heaven? Are you the watch? That you order us to stop, said the taller of the two men, freeing his arm from the folds of his cloak. Pretend that we are the watch, said the king, and stop when we tell you to do so. Leaning over to Henry's ear, he added, now you will see the volcano send forth its fire. There are 8 of you, said the taller of the two men, this time showing not only his arm but his face. But were you 100, pass on. Ah, the Duc de Guise, said Henry. Ah, our cousin from Lorraine, said the king. At last you will meet. How fortunate. The king, cried the duke. At these words the other man covered himself with his cloak and stood motionless, having first uncovered out of respect. Sire, said the Duc de Guise, I have just been paying a visit to my sister-in-law, Madame de Condé. Yes, and you brought one of your gentlemen with you? Which one? Sire, replied the duke, your majesty does not know him. We will meet him, however, said the king. Walking up to the other figure, he signed to one of the lackeys to bring a torch. Pardon me, brother, said the Duc d'Anjou, opening his cloak and bowing with poorly disguised anger. Ah, Henry, is it you? But no, it is not possible. I am mistaken. My brother of Anjou would not have gone to see anyone else before first calling on me. He knows that for royal princes, returning to the capital, Paris is but one entrance, the gate of the Louvre. Pardon me, sire, said the Duc d'Anjou. I beg your majesty to excuse my thoughtlessness. Ah, yes, replied the king, mockingly. And what were you doing, brother, at the Hotel de Condé? Why, said the king of Navarre in his sly way, what your majesty intimated just now. And leaning over to the king, he ended his sentence in a burst of laughter. What is it? Asked the Duc de Guise, haughtily, for like everyone else at court, he had a way of treating the poor king of Navarre very rudely. Why should I not go and see my sister-in-law? Does not Monsieur le Duc d'Alencon visit his? Henry flushed slightly. What sister-in-law? Asked Charles. I know none except Queen Elizabeth. Pardon, sire. It was your sister, I should have said, Madame Marguerite, whom we saw pass in a litter as we came by here half an hour ago. She was accompanied by 2 courtiers who rode on either side of her. Indeed, said Charles. What do you say to that, Henry? That the Queen of Navarre is perfectly free to go where she pleases, but I doubt if she has left the Louvre. Well, I am sure she did, said the Duc de Guise. And I, too, said the Duc d'Anjou, from the fact that the litter stopped in the Rue Cloche-Percée. Your sister-in-law, not this one, said Henry, pointing to the Hotel de Condé, but that one, turning in the direction of the Hotel de Guise, must also be of the party, for we left them together, and, as you know, they are inseparable. I do not know what your majesty means, replied the Duc de Guise. On the contrary, said the king, nothing is simpler. That is why a courtier was riding at either side of the litter. Well, said the duke, If there is any scandal concerning my sisters-in-law, let us beg the king to withhold justice." "Well, by heaven," said Henry, "let us leave Madame de Conde and Madame de Nevers. The king is not anxious about his sister, and I have confidence in my wife." "No, no," said Charles. "I want to make sure of it, but let us attend to the matter ourselves. The litter stopped in the Rue Cloche-Percé. You say, cousin?" "Yes, sire." "Do you know the house?" "Yes, sire." "Well, let us go to it, and if in order to find out who is in it, it is necessary to burn it down, we will burn it." It was with this end in view, which was rather discouraging for the tranquility of those concerned, that the four chief lords of the Christian world set out to the Rue Saint-Antoine. They reached the Rue Cloche-Percé. Charles, who wished to work privately, dismissed the gentlemen of his suite, saying that they might have the rest of the night to themselves, but for them to be at the Bastille with 2 horses at 6 o'clock in the morning. There were only 3 houses in the Rue Cloche-Percé. The search was much less difficult, as 2 of the buildings were perfectly willing to open their doors. One of the houses faced the Rue Saint-Antoine, and the other the Rue du Roi de Sicile. As to the 3rd house, that was a different matter. It was the one which was guarded by the German janitor, and this janitor was not easily managed. That night Paris seemed destined to offer memorable examples of conjugal fidelity. In vain did Monsieur de Guise threaten in his purest Saxon. In vain did Henry of Anjou offer a purse filled with gold. In vain Charles went so far as to say that he was lieutenant of the watch. The brave German paid attention neither to the statement, the offer, nor the threats. Seeing that they insisted, and in a way that was becoming importunate, he slipped the nose of a gun under the iron bars, a move which brought forth bursts of laughter from 3 of the 4 visitors. Henry of Navarre stood apart, as if the affair had no interest for him. But as a weapon could not be turned between the bars, it was scarcely dangerous for any except a blind man, who might stand directly in front of it. Seeing that the porter was neither to be intimidated, bribed, nor persuaded, the Duc de Guise pretended to leave with his companions, but the retreat did not last long. At the corner of the Rue Saint-Antoine, the Duke found what he sought. This was a rock similar in size to those which 3,000 years before had been moved by Ajax, son of Telamon, and Diomede. The Duke raised it to his shoulder and came back, signing to his companions to follow. Just then the janitor, who had seen those he took for malefactors depart, closed the door, but he had not time to draw the bolts before the Duc de Guise took advantage of the moment and hurled his veritable living catapult against the door. The lock broke, carrying away a portion of the wall to which it had been fastened. The door sprang open, knocking down the German, who, in falling, gave a terrible cry. This cry awakened the garrison, which otherwise would have run great risk of being surprised. At that moment La Mole and Marguerite were translating an idyll of Theocritus, and Coconnas, pretending that he too was a Greek, was drinking some strong wine from Syracuse with Henriette. The scientific and bacchanalian conversation was violently interrupted. La Mole and Coconnas at once extinguished the candles, and opening the windows, sprang out on the balcony. Then perceiving 4 men in the darkness, they set to work to hurl at them everything they had at hand, in the meantime making a frightful noise with blows from the flat of their swords, which, however, struck nothing but the wall. Charles, the most infuriated of the besiegers, received a sharp blow on the shoulder, the Duc d'Anjou a bowl full of orange and lemon marmalade, and the Duc de Guise a leg of venison. Henry received nothing. He was downstairs questioning the porter, whom Monsieur de Guise had strapped to the door, and who continued to answer by his eternal "Ich verste he nicht." The women encouraged the besieged by handing them projectiles, which succeeded one another like hailstones. "The devil!" exclaimed Charles IX, as a table struck his head, driving his hat over his eyes. "If they don't open the door pretty soon, I will have them all hanged." "My brother," whispered Marguerite to La Mole. "The king!" cried the latter to Henriette. "The king, the king," repeated Henriette to Coconnas, who was dragging a chest to the window, and who was trying to exterminate the Duc de Guise. Without knowing who the latter was, he was having a private struggle with him. "The king, I tell you," repeated Henriette. Coconnas let go of the chest and looked up in amazement. "The king?" said he. "Yes, The king. Then let us hide. Yes, La Mole and Marguerite have already fled. Come. Way. Come, I tell you. And seizing him by the hand, Henriette pushed Coconnas through the secret door which connected with the adjoining house, and all four, having locked this door behind them, escaped into the Rue Tizon. Oh, oh, said Charles, I think that the garrison has surrendered. They waited a few minutes. No sound reached the besiegers. They are preparing some ruse, said the Duc de Guise. It is more likely that they have recognized my brother's voice and have fled, said the Duc d'Anjou. They would have to pass by here, said Charles. Yes, said the Duc d'Anjou, unless the house has two exits. Cousin, said the king, take up your stone again and hurl it against the other door as you did at this. The Duke thought it unnecessary to resort to such means, and as he had noticed that the second door was not as solid as the first, he broke it down by a simple kick. The torches, cried the king. The lackeys approached. The torches were out, but the men had everything necessary for relighting them. This was done. Charles IX took one and handed the other to the Duc d'Anjou. The Duc de Guise entered first, sword in hand. Henry brought up the rear. They reached the first floor. In the dining room the table was set, or rather upset, for it was a supper which had furnished the projectiles. The candlesticks were overturned, the furniture topsy-turvy, and everything which was not silver plate lay in fragments. They entered the reception room, but found no more clue there than in the other room as to the identity of the revelers. Some Greek and Latin books and several musical instruments were all they saw. The sleeping room was more silent still. A night lamp burned in an alabaster globe suspended from the ceiling, but it was evident that the room had not been occupied. There's a second door, said the king. Very likely, said the Duc d'Anjou. But where is it? Asked the Duc de Guise. They looked everywhere, but could not find it. Where's the janitor? Asked the king. I bound him to the gate, said the Duc de Guise. Ask him, cousin. He will not answer. Bah! We will have a dry fire built around his legs, said the king, laughing. Then he will speak. Henry glanced hurriedly out of the window. He is not there, said he. Who untied him? Asked the Duc de Guise, quickly. The devil, exclaimed the king, and we know nothing as yet. Well, said Henry, you see very clearly, sire, that there is nothing to prove that my wife and Monsieur de Guise's sister-in-law have been in this house. That is so, said Charles. The scriptures tell us that there are three things which leave no trace: the bird in the air, the fish in the sea, and the woman. No, I am wrong. The man in... So, interrupted Henry, what we had better do is... Yes, said Charles, what we had better do is for me to look after my bruise, for you, d'Anjou, to wipe off your orange marmalade, and for you, de Guise, to get rid of the grease. Thereupon they left without even troubling to close the door, reaching the Rue Saint-Antoine. Where are you bound for, gentlemen? Asked the king of the Duc d'Anjou and the Duc de Guise. Sire, we are going to the house of Nanteuil, who is expecting my Lorraine cousin and myself to supper. Will your majesty come with us? No, thanks, we are going in a different direction. Will you take one of my torchbearers? Thank you. No, sire, said the Duc d'Anjou hastily. Good. He is afraid I will spy on him, whispered Charles to the King of Navarre. Then taking the latter by the arm, Come, Henriette, said he, I will take you to supper tonight. Are we not going back to the Louvre? Asked Henry. No, I tell you, you stupid. Come with me, since I tell you to come. Come. And he dragged Henry down the Rue Geoffroy-Lasnier. Chapter 36. The Anagram. The Rue Garnier-sur-Lot runs into the Rue Geoffroy-Lasnier, and the Rue des Barras lies at right angles to the former. On the right, a short distance down the Rue de la Mortellerie, stands a small house in the center of a garden surrounded by a high wall, which is but one entrance. Charles drew a key from his pocket and inserted it into the lock. The gate was unbolted and immediately opened. Telling Henry and the lackey bearing the torch to enter, the king closed and locked the gate behind him. Light came from one small window which Charles smilingly pointed out to Henry. "Sire, I do not understand," said the latter. "But you will, Henriot." The King of Navarre looked at Charles in amazement. His voice and his face had assumed an expression of gentleness so different from usual that Henry scarcely recognized him. "Henriot," said the king, "I told you that when I left the Louvre I came out of hell. When I enter here I am in paradise." "Sire," said Henry, "I am happy that your majesty has thought me worthy of taking this trip to heaven with you." "The road thither is a narrow one," said the king, turning to a small stairway, "but nothing can be compared to it." "Who is the angel who guards the entrance to your Eden, sire?" "You shall see," replied Charles IX. Signing to Henry to follow him noiselessly, he opened first one door, then another, and finally paused on a threshold. "Look," said he. Henry approached and gazed on one of the most beautiful pictures he had ever seen. A young woman of 18 or 19 lay sleeping, her head resting on the foot of a little bed in which a child was asleep. The woman held its little feet close to her lips, while her long hair fell over her shoulders like a flood of gold. It was like one of Albane's pictures of the Virgin and the child Jesus. "Oh, sire," said the King of Navarre, "who is this lovely creature?" "The angel of my paradise, Henriot, the only one who loves me." Henry smiled. "Yes," said Charles, "for she loved me before she knew I was king. And since she has known it—" "Well, since she has known it," said Charles, with a smile which showed that royalty sometimes weighed heavily on him. "Since she has known it, she loves me still, so you may judge." The king approached the woman softly and pressed a kiss as light as that which a bee gives to a lily on her rosy cheek. Yet, light as it was, she awakened at once. "Charles," she murmured, opening her eyes. "You see," said the king, "she calls me Charles. The queen says, sire." "Oh," cried the young woman, "you are not alone, my king." "No, my sweet Marie. I wanted to bring you another king, happier than myself because he has no crown, more unhappy than I because he has no Marie Touché. God makes compensation for everything." "Sire, is it the King of Navarre?" asked Marie. "Yes, my child. Come here, Henriot." The King of Navarre drew near. Charles took him by the hand. "See this hand, Marie," said he. "It is the hand of a good brother and a loyal friend. Were it not for this hand—" "Well, sire—" "Well, had it not been for this hand today, Marie, our child would have no father." Marie uttered a cry, fell on her knees, and seizing Henry's hand covered it with kisses. "Very good, Marie, very good," said Charles. "What have you done to thank him, sire?" "I have done for him what he did for me." Henry looked at Charles in astonishment. "Some day you will know what I mean. Henriot, meanwhile come here and see." He approached the bed on which the child still slept. "Ow!" said he. "If this little fellow were in the Louvre instead of here in this little house in the Rue des Barras, many things would be changed for the present as well as for the future, perhaps." "Sire," said Marie, "if your majesty is willing, I prefer him to stay here. He sleeps better." "Let us not disturb his slumber, then," said the king. "It is so sweet to sleep when one does not dream." "Well, sire," said Marie, pointing to a door opening out of the room. "Yes, you are right, Marie," said Charles IX. "Let us have supper." "My well-beloved Charles," said Marie, "you will ask the king your brother to excuse me, will you not?" "Why?" "For having dismissed our servants, sire," continued Marie, turning to the King of Navarre. "You must know that Charles wants to be served by me alone." "Venter Saint Grace," said Henry. "I should think so." Both men entered the dining room. The mother, anxious and careful, laid a warm blanket over the little Charles, who, thanks to the sound sleep of childhood, so envied by his father, had not wakened. Marie rejoined them. "They are only two covers," said the king. "Permit me," said Marie, "to serve your majesties." "Now," said Charles, "this is where you cause me trouble, Henriot." "How so, sire?" Did you not hear? Forgive me, Charles, forgive me. Yes, I will forgive you. But sit here near me between us. I will obey, said Marie. She brought a plate, sat down between the two kings, and served them. Is it not good, Henriette, said Charles, to have one place in the world in which one can eat and drink without needing anyone to taste the meats and wines beforehand? Sire, said Henry, smiling, and by the smile replying to the constant fear in his own mind, believe me, I appreciate your happiness more than anyone. And tell her, Henriette, that in order for us to live happily, she must not mingle in politics. Above all, she must not become acquainted with my mother. Queen Catherine loves Her Majesty so passionately that she would be jealous of any other love, replied Henry, finding by a subterfuge a means of avoiding the dangerous confidence of the king. Marie, said the latter, I have brought you one of the finest and the wittiest men I know. At court, you see, and this is saying a great deal, he puts everyone in the shade. I alone have clearly understood, not his heart, perhaps, but his mind. Sire, said Henry, I am sorry that in exaggerating the one as you do, you mistrust the other. I exaggerate nothing, Henriette, said the king. Besides, you will be known some day. Then turning to the young woman, he makes delightful anagrams. Ask him to make one of your name. I will answer that he will do it. Oh, what could you expect to find in the name of a poor girl like me? What gentle thought could there be in the letters with which chance spelled Marie Touchet? Oh, the anagram from this name, Sire, said Henry, is so easy that there is no great merit in finding it. Ah, it is already found, said Charles. You see, Marie. Henry drew his tablets from the pocket of his doublet, tore out a paper, and below the name Marie Touchet wrote G. Charm Tout. Then he handed the paper to the young woman. Truly, she cried, it is impossible. What has he found? Asked Charles. Sire, I dare not repeat it. Sire, said Henry, in the name Marie Touchet there is letter for letter, by changing the into a J, as is often done, J. Charm Tout. I charm all. Yes, exclaimed Charles, letter for letter. I want this to be your motto, Marie. Do you hear? Never was one better deserved. Thanks, Henriette. Marie, I will give it to you written in diamonds. The supper over, 2 o'clock struck from Notre Dame. Now, said Charles, in return for this compliment, Marie, you will give the king an armchair in which he can sleep until daybreak, but let it be some distance from us, because he snores frightfully. Then if you wake him before I do, you will rouse me, for at 6 o'clock we have to be at the Bastille. Good night, Henriette. Make yourself as comfortable as possible. But, he added, approaching the King of Navarre and laying his hand on his shoulder, for your life, Henry, do you hear? For your life, do not leave here without me, especially to return to the Louvre. Henry had suspected too many things in what still remained unexplained to him to disobey such advice. Charles IX entered his room, and Henry, the sturdy mountaineer, settled himself in an armchair, in which he soon justified the precaution taken by his brother-in-law in keeping at a distance. At dawn he was awakened by Charles. As he had not undressed, it did not take him long to finish his toilet. The king was more happy and smiling than he ever was at the Louvre. The hours spent by him in that little house in the Rue des Barras were his hours of sunshine. Both men went out through the sleeping room. The young woman was still in bed. The child was asleep in its cradle. Both were smiling. Charles looked at them for a moment with infinite tenderness. Then turning to the King of Navarre, Henriette, said he, if you ever hear what I did for you last night, or if misfortune come to me, remember this child asleep in its cradle. Then kissing both mother and child on the forehead, without giving Henry time to question him, Goodbye, my angels, said he, and went out. Henry followed, deep in thought. The horses were waiting for them at the Bastille, held by the gentleman to whom Charles IX had given the order. Charles signed to Henry to mount, sprang into his own saddle, and riding through the garden of the Arbolite, followed the outside highways. Where are we going? asked Henry. "We are going to see if the Duc d'Anjou returned from Madame de Condé alone," replied Charles, "and if there's as much ambition as love in his heart, which I greatly doubt." Henry did not understand the answer, but followed Charles in silence. They reached the Marais, and as from the shadow of the palisades they could see all which at that time was called the Faubourg Saint-Laurent. Charles pointed out to Henry through the grayish mist of the morning some men wrapped in great cloaks and wearing fur caps. They were on horseback, and rode ahead of a wagon which was heavily laden. As they drew near they became outlined more clearly, and one could see another man in a long brown cloak, his face hidden by a French hat, riding and talking with them. Ah, said Charles, smiling. "I thought so." "Well, sire," said Henry, "if I am not mistaken, that rider in the brown cloak is the Duc d'Anjou." "Yes," said Charles IX. "Turn out a little. Henriette, I do not want him to see us." "But," asked Henry, "who are the men in grey cloaks with fur caps?" "Those men," said Charles, "are Polish ambassadors, and in that wagon is a crown. And now," said he, urging his horse to a gallop, and turning into the road of the Porte du Temple, "come, Henriette, I have seen all that I wanted to see." Chapter 37. The Return to the Louvre. When Catherine thought that everything was over in the King of Navarre's rooms, when the dead gods had been removed, when Marguerite had been carried to her apartments, and the carpet had been cleaned, she dismissed her women, for it was almost midnight, and strove to sleep. But the shock had been too violent, and the disappointment too keen. That detested Henry, constantly escaping a sneeze, which were usually fatal, seemed protected by some invincible power which Catherine persisted in calling chance, although in her heart of hearts a voice told her that its true name was destiny. The thought that the report of the new attempt in spreading throughout the Louvre and beyond the Louvre would give a greater confidence than ever in the future to Henry and the Huguenots exasperated her, and at that moment had chance, against which she was so unfortunately struggling, delivered her enemy into her hands. Surely with the little Florentine dagger she wore at her belt she could have thwarted that destiny so favorable to the King of Navarre. The hours of the night, hours so long for one waiting and watching, struck one after another without Catherine's being able to close her eyes. A whole world of new plans unrolled in her visionary mind during those nocturnal hours. Finally at daybreak she rose, dressed herself, and went to the apartments of Charles IX. The guards, who were accustomed to see her go to the king at all hours of the day and night, let her pass. She crossed the antechamber, therefore, and reached the armory. But there she found the nurse of Charles, who was awake. "My son," said the queen. "Madam, he gave orders that no one was to be admitted to his room before 8 o'clock." "This order was not for me, nurse. It was for everyone, madam." Catherine smiled. "Yes, I know very well," said the nurse, "that no one has any right to oppose your majesty. I therefore beg you to listen to the prayer of a poor woman and to refrain from entering." "Nurse, I must speak to my son." "Madam, I will not open the door except on a formal order from your majesty." "Open, nurse," said Catherine. "I order you to open." At this voice, more respected and much more feared in the Louvre than that of Charles himself, the nurse handed the key to Catherine. But the queen had no need of it. She drew from her pocket her own key of the room, and under its heavy pressure the door yielded. The room was vacant. Charles's bed was untouched, and his greyhound Action, asleep on the bare skin that covered the step of the bed, rose and came forward to lick the ivory hands of Catherine. "Ah," said the queen, frowning, "he is out. I will wait for him." She seated herself, pensive and gloomy, at the window which overlooked the court of the Louvre, and from which the chief entrance was visible. For 2 hours she sat there, as motionless and pale as a marble statue, when at length she perceived a troop of horsemen returning to the Louvre, at whose head she recognized Charles and Henry of Navarre. Then she understood all. Instead of arguing with her in regard to the arrest of his brother-in-law, Charles had taken him away and so had saved him. "Blind, blind, blind," she murmured. Then she waited. An instant later footsteps were heard in the adjoining room, which was the army. "But, sire," Henry was saying, "now that we have returned to the Louvre, tell me why you took me away and what is the service you have rendered me." No, no, Henriot, replied Charles, laughing. Some day, perhaps, you will find out, but for the present it must remain a mystery. Know only that for the time being you have in all probability brought about a fierce quarrel between my mother and me. As he uttered these words, Charles raised the curtain and found himself face to face with Catherine. Behind him and above his shoulder rose the pale, anxious countenance of the Benet. "Ah, you here, madam?" said Charles IX, frowning. "Yes, my son," said Catherine. "I want to speak to you." "To me?" "To you alone." "Well, well," said Charles, turning to his brother-in-law. "Since there is no escape, the sooner the better." "I will leave you, sire," said Henry. "Yes, yes, leave us," replied Charles. "And as you are Catholic, Henriot, go and hear mass of me while I stay for the sermon." Henry bowed and withdrew. Charles IX went directly to the point. "Well, madam," said he, trying to make a joke of the affair, "by heaven, you are waiting to scold me, are you not? I wickedly upset your little plan. Well, the devil. I could not let the man who had just saved my life be arrested and taken to the Bastille. Nor did I want to quarrel with my mother. I am a good son. Moreover," he added in a low tone, "the Lord punishes children who quarrel with their mothers. Witness my brother Francois too. Forgive me, therefore, frankly, and confess that the joke was a good one." "Sire," said Catherine, "your majesty is mistaken. It is not a joke." "Yes, yes, and you will end by looking at it in that way, or the devil take me. Sire, by your blunder you have baffled a project which would have led to an important discovery." "Wow! A project! Are you embarrassed because of a baffled project? Mother, you can make 20 others, and in those, well, I promise I will second you." "Now that you will second me it is too late, for he is warned and will be on his guard." "Well," said the king, "let us come to the point. What have you against Henriot?" "The fact that he conspires." "Yes, I know that this is your constant accusation, but does not everyone conspire more or less in this charming royal household called the Louvre? But he conspires more than anyone, and he is much more dangerous than one imagines." "A regular Lorenzino," said Charles. "Listen," said Catherine, becoming gloomy at mention of this name, which reminded her of one of the bloodiest catastrophes in the history of Florence. "Listen, there is a way of proving to me that I am wrong." "What way, mother?" "Ask Henry who was in his room last night." "In his room last night?" "Yes, and if he tells you." "Well, well, I shall be ready to admit that I have been mistaken. But in case it was a woman, we cannot ask." "A woman?" "Yes, a woman who killed 2 of your guards and perhaps mortally wounded Monsieur de Malrevel." "Oh, oh," said the king, "this is serious. Was there any bloodshed?" 3 men were stretched on the floor, and the one who reduced them to this state escaped safe and sound. "By Gog and Magog," exclaimed Charles, "he was a brave fellow, and you are right, mother, I must know him." "Well, I tell you in advance that you will not know him, at least not through Henry. But through you, mother? The man did not escape without leaving some trace, without your noticing some part of his clothing." "Nothing was noticed except the very elegant red cloak which he wore." "Ah, ah, a red cloak," cried Charles. "I know only one at court remarkable enough to attract attention." "Exactly," said Catherine. "Well?" demanded Charles. "Well," said Catherine, "wait for me in your rooms, my son, and I will go and see if my orders are being carried out." Catherine left, and Charles, alone, began walking up and down distractedly, whistling a hunting song, one hand in his doublet, the other hanging down, which his dog licked every time he paused. As to Henry, he had left his brother-in-law greatly disturbed, and instead of going along the main corridor, he had taken the small private stairway, to which we have already referred more than once, and which led to the second story. Scarcely had he ascended 4 steps before he perceived a figure at the first landing. He stopped, raising his hand to his dagger. But he soon saw it was a woman, who took hold of his hand and said in a charming voice which he well knew, "Thank God, sire, you are safe and sound. I was so afraid for you, but no doubt God heard my prayer." "What has happened?" said Henry. "You will know when you reach your rooms. You need not worry over Ordhan. I have seen to him." The young woman descended the stairs hastily, making Henry believe that she had met him by chance. "That is strange," said Henry to himself. "What is the matter? What has happened to Ordhan?" Unfortunately, the question was not heard by Madame de Sauve, for the latter had already disappeared. Suddenly at the top of the stairs, Henry perceived another figure, but this time it was that of a man. "Hush," said the man. "Ah, is it you, Francois? Do not call me by my name." "What has happened?" "Return to your rooms, and you will see. Then slip into the corridor, look carefully around to make sure that no one is spying on you, and come to my apartments. The door will be ajar." He, too, disappeared down the stairs, like the phantoms in a theater who glide through a trapdoor. "Venter Saint Grace," murmured the Benet. "The puzzle continues, but since the answer is in my rooms, let us go thither and find it." However, it was not without emotion that Henry went on his way. He had the sensitivity and the superstition of youth. Everything was clearly reflected on his mind, the surface of which was as smooth as a mirror, and what he had just heard foretold trouble. He reached the door of his rooms and listened. Not a sound. Besides, since Charlotte had said to return to his apartments, it was evident that there was nothing for him to fear by doing so. He glanced hurriedly around the first room. It was vacant. Nothing showed that anything had occurred. "Ordhan is not here," said he. He passed on to the next room. There everything was explained. In spite of the water which had been thrown on in bucketsful, great red spots covered the floor. A piece of furniture was broken. The bed curtains had been slashed by the sword. A Venetian mirror had been shattered by a bullet. And a bloody hand which had left its terrible imprint on the wall showed that this silent chamber had been the scene of a frightful struggle. Henry embraced all these details at a glance, and passing his hand across his forehead, now damp with perspiration, murmured, "Ah, I know now the service the king has rendered me. They came here to assassinate me, and, Demouy, what have they done to Demouy? The wretches, they may have killed him." And as anxious to learn the news as the Duc d'Alencon was to tell it, Henry threw a last mournful glance on the surrounding objects, hurried from the room, reached the corridor, made sure that it was vacant, and pushing open the half-closed door, which he carefully shut behind him, he hurried to the Duc d'Alencon's. The Duke was waiting for him in the first room. Laying his finger on his lips, he hastily took Henry's hand and drew him into a small round tower which was completely isolated, and which consequently was out of range of spies. Brother," said he, "what a horrible night." "What happened?" asked Henry. "They tried to arrest you." "Me?" "Yes, you." "For what reason?" "I do not know." "Where were you?" "The king took me into the city with him last night." "Then he knew about it," said d'Alencon. "But since you were not in your rooms, who was—" "Was someone there?" asked Henry as if he were ignorant of the fact. "Yes, a man. When I had heard the noise, I ran to help you, but it was too late." "Was the man arrested?" asked Henry, anxiously. "No. He escaped after he had wounded Marguerite dangerously and killed 2 guards." "Ah, brave Demouy!" cried Henry. "It was Demouy, then," said d'Alencon. Quickly, Henry saw that he had made a mistake. "I presume so," said he, "for I had an appointment with him to discuss your escape, and to tell him that I had yielded all my rights to the throne of Navarre to you." "If that is known," said d'Alencon, growing pale, "we are lost." "Yes, for Marguerite will speak." Marguerite received a sword thrust in his throat, and I found out from the surgeon who dressed the wound that it would be a week before he would utter a single word. "A week? That is more than enough for Demouy to escape." "For that matter," said d'Alencon, "it might have been someone besides Monsieur Demouy." "You think so?" said Henry. "Yes, The man disappeared very quickly, and nothing but his red cloak was seen. "And a red cloak," said Henry, "is more apt to be worn by a courtier than by a soldier. I should never suspect a Mui in a red cloak." "No, if anyone was suspected," said D'Alencon, "it would be more apt to be." He stopped. "It would be more likely to be Monsieur de la Mole," said Henry. "Certainly, since I myself, who saw the man running away, thought so for an instant." "You thought so? Why, it must have been Monsieur de la Mole, then." "Does he know anything?" asked D'Alencon. "Absolutely nothing. At least, nothing of importance." "Brother," said the Duke, "I really think now that it was he." "The devil," said Henry, "if it was, that will trouble the Queen greatly, for she is interested in him." "Interested, you say?" said D'Alencon in amazement. "Yes. Do you not remember, Francois, that it was your sister who recommended him to you?" "Yes," said the Duke in a dull voice. "So I tried to be agreeable to him. The proof of this is that, fearing his red cloak might compromise him, I went up to his rooms and took the cloak away." "Oh, oh!" exclaimed Henry. "That was doubly prudent, and now I would not bet, but I would swear, that it was he." "Even in court?" asked Francois. "Faith, yes," replied Henry. "He probably came to bring me some message from Marguerite." "If I was sure of being upheld by your testimony," said D'Alencon, "I would almost accuse him." "If you were to accuse him," replied Henry, "you understand, brother, that I would not contradict you." "But the Queen," said D'Alencon. "Ah, yes, the Queen. We must know what you would do." "I will undertake to find out." "Plague it, brother, she will do wrong to lie to us. For this affair will make a glorious reputation of bravery for the young man, and which cannot have cost him dear either, for he probably bought it on credit. Furthermore, it is true that he is well able to pay back both interest and capital." "Well, what can you expect?" said Henry. "In this base world one has nothing for nothing." And bowing and smiling to D'Alencon, he cautiously thrust his head into the corridor, and making sure that no one had been listening, he hurried rapidly away, and disappeared down the private stairway which led to the apartments of Marguerite. As far as she was concerned, the Queen of Navarre was no less anxious than her husband. The night's expedition sent against her and the Duchesse de Nevers by the king, the Duc d'Anjou, the Duc de Guise, and Henry, whom she had recognized, troubled her greatly. In all probability, there was nothing which could compromise her. The janitor unfastened from a gate by La Mole and Coconnas had promised to be silent. But for lords like those with whom two simple gentlemen, such as La Mole and Coconnas, had coped, would not have gone out of their way by chance, or without having had some reason for thus inconveniencing themselves. Marguerite had returned at daybreak, having passed the rest of the night with the Duchesse de Nevers. She had retired at once, but had been unable to sleep, and had started at the slightest sound. In the midst of this anxiety, she heard someone knocking at the secret door, and being informed that the visitor was Guillaume, she gave orders to have her admitted. Henry waited at the outer door. Nothing in his appearance showed the wounded husband. His usual smile lay on his delicate lips, and not a muscle of his face betrayed the terrible anxiety through which he had just passed. He seemed to glance inquiringly at Marguerite to discover if she would allow him to talk with her alone. Marguerite understood her husband's look, and signed to Guillaume to withdraw. "Madam," said Henry, "I know how deeply you are attached to your friends, and I fear I bring you bad news." "What is it, monsieur?" asked Marguerite. "One of your dearest servants is at present greatly compromised." "Which one?" "The dear Count de la Mole." "Monsieur le Comte de la Mole compromised. And why?" "Because of the affair of last night." In spite of her self-control, Marguerite could not keep from blushing, but she made an effort over herself. "What affair?" she asked. "What?" said Henry. "Did you not hear all the noise which was made in the Louvre?" "No, monsieur." "I congratulate you, madam," said Henry, with charming simplicity. "This proves that you are a sound sleeper." "But what happened?" It seems that our good mother gave an order to Monsieur de Mareville and 6 of his men to arrest me. You, monsieur, you? Yes, me. For what reason? Ah, who can tell the reasons of a mind as subtle as that of your mother? I suspect the reasons, but I do not know them positively. And you were not in your rooms? No, I happened not to be. You have guessed rightly. Madam, I was not. Last evening the king asked me to go out with him. But, although I was not in my rooms, someone else was. Who? It seems that it was the Count de la Mole. The Count de la Mole, exclaimed Marguerite, astonished. By heavens, what a lively little fellow this man from the provinces is, continued Henry. Do you know that he wounded Mareville and killed 2 guards? Wounded Monsieur de Mareville and killed 2 guards. Impossible. What? You doubt his courage, madam? No, but I say that Monsieur de la Mole could not have been in your rooms. Why not? Why? Because, said Marguerite, embarrassed, because he was elsewhere. Ah, if he can prove an alibi, said Henry, that is different. He will tell where he was, and the matter will be settled. Where was he? Said Marguerite, quickly. In all probability the day will not pass without his being arrested and questioned. But unfortunately as there are proofs. Proofs? What proofs? The man who made this desperate defense wore a red cloak. But Monsieur de la Mole is not the only one who has a red cloak. I know another man who has one. No doubt, and I too know one. But this is what will happen. If it was not Monsieur de la Mole who was in my rooms, it must have been the other man who wears a red cloak, like La Mole. Now, do you know who this other man is? Heavens! There lies the danger. You, as well as myself, madam, have seen it. Your emotion proves this. Let us now talk like 2 people who are discussing the most desirable thing in the world, a throne, a most precious gift, life. Demouy arrested, we are ruined. Yes, I understand that. While Monsieur de la Mole compromises no one, at least you would not suppose him capable of inventing a story such as, for instance, that he was with some ladies, whom I know. Monsieur, said Marguerite, if you fear only that, you may be easy. He will not say it. What? Said Henry. Would he remain silent if death were to be the price of his silence? He would remain silent, monsieur. You are sure of this? I am sure. Then everything is for the best, said Henry, rising. You are going, monsieur, asked Marguerite, quickly. Oh, my God, yes, this is all I had to say to you. And you are going. To try and get out of the trouble we are being put to by this devil of a man in the red cloak. Oh, my God, the poor young man, cried Marguerite, pitifully wringing her hands. Really, said Henry, as he went out, this dear Monsieur de la Mole is a faithful servant. Chapter 38. The Girdle of the Queen Mother. Charles entered his room, smiling and joking. But after a conversation of 10 minutes with his mother, one would have said that the latter had given him her pallor and anger in exchange for the light-heartedness of a son. Monsieur de la Mole, said Charles, Monsieur de la Mole, Henry and the Duc d'Alencon must be sent for. Henry, because this young man was a Huguenot, the Duc d'Alencon, because he is in his service. Send for them if you wish, my son, but you will learn nothing. Henry and Francois, I fear, are much more closely bound together than one would suppose from appearances. To question them is to suspect them. I think it will be better to wait for the slow but sure proof of time. If you give the guilty ones time to breathe again, my son, if you let them think they have escaped your vigilance, they will become bold and triumphant, and will give you a better opportunity to punish them. Then we shall know everything. Charles walked up and down, undecided, knowing his anger, as a horse knows his bit, and pressing his clenched hand to his heart, which was consumed by his one idea. No, said he, at length, I will not wait. You do not know what it is to wait, beset with suspicions as I am. Besides, every day these courtiers become more insolent. Even last night did not two of them dare to cope with us? If Monsieur de la Mole is innocent, very good. But I should not be sorry to know where Monsieur de la Mole was last night, while they were attacking my guards in the Louvre, and me in the Rue Cloche-Passy. So let the Duc d'Alencon be sent for, and afterwards Henry. I will question them separately. You may remain, Mother. Catherine sat down. For a determined spirit such as hers was, every incident turned by a powerful hand would lead her to her goal, although it might seem to be leading away from it. From every blow there would result noise and a spark. The noise would guide, the spark give light. The Duc d'Alencon entered. His previous conversation with Henry had prepared him for this interview, therefore he was quite calm. His replies were very exact. Warned by his mother to remain in his own rooms, he was completely ignorant of the events of the night. But as his apartments opened upon the same corridor as did those of the King of Navarre, he had at first thought he heard a sound like that of a door being broken in, then curses, then pistol shots. Thereupon he had ventured to push his door partly open, and had seen a man in a red cloak running away. Charles and his mother exchanged glances. "In a red cloak," said the king. "In a red cloak," replied d'Alencon. "And do you have any suspicions regarding this red cloak?" D'Alencon rallied all his strength that he might lie as naturally as possible. "At first sight," said he, "I must confess to your majesty that I thought I recognized the red cloak of one of my gentlemen." "What is the name of this gentleman?" "Monsieur de la Mole." "Why was not Monsieur de la Mole with you as his duty required him to be?" "I had given him leave of absence," said the Duke. "That is well. Now you may go," said Charles. The Duc d'Alencon started towards the door by which he had entered. "Not that way," said Charles. "This way." And he indicated the door opening into his nurse's room. Charles did not want Francois and Henry to meet. He did not know that they had already seen each other for an instant, and that this instant had sufficed for the two brothers-in-law to agree on their plans. At a sign from Charles, Henry entered. He did not wait for Charles to question him, however. "Sire," said he, "your majesty has done well to send for me, for I was just coming to demand justice of you." Charles frowned. "Yes, justice," said Henry. "I will begin by thanking your majesty for having taken me with you last night, for, by doing this, I now know that you saved my life. But what had I done that an attempt should be made to assassinate me?" "Not to assassinate," said Catherine, quickly, "but to arrest you." "Well," said Henry, "even so. What crime have I committed to merit arrest? If I am guilty, I am as much so this morning as I was last evening. Tell me my offense, sire." Embarrassed as to what reply to make, Charles looked at his mother. "My son," said Catherine, "you receive suspicious characters." "Very good," said Henry. "And these suspicious characters compromise me. Is that it, madam?" "Yes, Henry." "Give me their names. Give me their names. Who are they? Let me see them." "Really," said Charles, "Henriette has a right to demand an explanation." "And I do demand it," said Henry, realizing the superiority of his position and anxious to make the most of it. "I ask it from my good brother Charles, and from my good mother Catherine. Since my marriage with Marguerite, have I not been a kind husband? Ask Marguerite, a good Catholic. Ask my confessor, a good relative. Ask those who were at the hunt yesterday." "Yes, that is true, Henriette," said the king. "But what can you do? They claim that you conspire." "Against whom?" "Against me." "Sire, if I had been conspiring against you, I had merely to let events take their course, when your horse broke his knee and could not rise, or when the furious were turned on your majesty." "Well, the devil. Mother, do you know that he is right? But who was in your rooms last night?" "Madam," said Henry, "in times when so few dare to answer for themselves, I should never attempt to answer for others. I left my rooms at 7 o'clock in the evening. At 10 o'clock my brother Charles took me away, and I spent the night with him. I could not be with your majesty and know what was going on in my rooms at the same time." "But," said Catherine, "it is none the less true that one of your men killed two of his majesty's guards and wounded Monsieur de Marrevel." One of my men, said Henry. What man, madam? Name him. Everyone accuses Monsieur de la Mole. Monsieur de la Mole is not in my suite, madam. Monsieur de la Mole belongs to Monsieur d'Alencon, to whom he was recommended by your daughter. But, said Charles, was it Monsieur de la Mole who was in your rooms? Henriette. How can you expect me to know, sire? I can say neither yes nor no. Monsieur de la Mole is an exceptional servant, thoroughly devoted to the Queen of Navarre. He often brings me messages, either from Marguerite, to whom he is grateful for having recommended him to Monsieur le Duc d'Alencon, or from Monsieur le Duc himself. I cannot say that it was not Monsieur de la Mole. It was he, said Catherine. His red cloak was recognized. Has Monsieur de la Mole a red cloak? Then, yes. And the man who so cleverly disposed of two of my guards and Monsieur de Marrevel had a red cloak? Asked Henry. Exactly, said Charles. I have nothing to say, said the Benet. But in any case, it seems to me that instead of summoning me here, since I was not in my rooms, it is Monsieur de la Mole who, having been there, as you say, should be questioned. But, said Henry, I must observe one thing to your majesty. What is that? This, that if I had seen an order signed by my king and had defended myself instead of obeying this order, I should be guilty and should deserve all sorts of punishment. But it was not I but some stranger whom this order in no way concerned. There was an attempt made to arrest him unjustly. He defended himself too well, perhaps, but he was in the right. And yet, murmured Catherine. Madam, said Henry, was the order to arrest me? Yes, said Catherine, and His Majesty himself signed it. Was it an order to arrest anyone found in my place in case I was not there? No, said Catherine. Well, said Henry, unless you prove that I was conspiring and that the man who was in my rooms was conspiring with me, this man is innocent. Then turning to Charles IX, Sire, continued Henry, I shall not leave the Louvre. At a simple word from your majesty, I shall even be ready to enter any state prison you may be pleased to suggest. But while waiting for the proof to the contrary, I have the right to call myself, and I do call myself the very faithful servant, subject, and brother of your majesty. And with a dignity hitherto unknown in him, Henry bowed to Charles and withdrew. Bravo, Henriette, said Charles, when the King of Navarre had left. Bravo, because he has defeated us, said Catherine. Why should I not applaud? When we fence together and he touches me, do I not say bravo? Mother, you are wrong to hate this boy as you do. My son, said Catherine, pressing the hand of Charles IX, I do not hate him, I fear him. Well, you are wrong, mother. Henriette is my friend. And as he said, had he been conspiring against me, he had only to let the wild boar alone. Yes, said Catherine, so that Monsieur le Duc d'Anjou, his personal enemy, might be King of France. Mother, whatever Henry's motive in saving my life, the fact is that he saved it, and, the devil, I do not want any harm to come to him. As to Monsieur de la Mole, well, I will talk about him with my brother d'Alencon, to whom he belongs. This was Charles IX's way of dismissing his mother, who withdrew endeavoring to fix his suspicions. On account of his unimportance, Monsieur de la Mole did not answer to her needs. Returning to her rooms, Catherine found Marguerite waiting for her. Ah, said she, is it you, my daughter? I sent for you last evening. I know it, madam, but I had gone out. And this morning, madam, I have come to tell your majesty that you are about to do a great wrong. What is that? You are going to have Monsieur le Comte de la Mole arrested. You are mistaken. My daughter, I am going to have no one arrested. It is the king, not I, who gives orders for arrests. Let us not quibble over the words, madam, when the circumstances are serious. Monsieur de la Mole is going to be arrested, is he not? Very likely. Accused of having been found in the chamber of the King of Navarre last night, and of having killed 2 guards and wounded Monsieur de Marrevel. Such indeed is the crime they impute to him. They imputed to him wrongly. Madam, said Marguerite, Monsieur de la Mole is not guilty. Monsieur de la Mole not guilty, said Catherine, giving a start of joy and thinking that what Marguerite was about to tell her would throw light on the subject. No, went on Marguerite, he is not guilty. He cannot be so, for he was not in the king's room. Where was he, then? In my room, madam. In your room? Yes, in my room. At this avowal from a daughter of France, Catherine felt like hurling a withering glance at Marguerite, but she merely crossed her arms on her lap. And, said she after a moment's silence, if Monsieur de la Mole is arrested and questioned, he will say where he was and with whom he was. Mother, replied Marguerite, although she felt sure the contrary. Since this is so, you are right, my daughter. Monsieur de la Mole must not be arrested. Marguerite shivered. It seemed to her that there was something strange and terrible in the way her mother uttered these words, but she had nothing to say, for what she had come to ask for had been granted her. But, said Catherine, if it was not Monsieur de la Mole who was in the king's room, it was someone else. Marguerite was silent. Do you know who it was? My daughter, said Catherine. No, mother, said Marguerite in an unsteady voice. Come, do not be half confidential. I repeat, madam, that I do not know, replied Marguerite again, growing pale in spite of herself. Well, said Catherine carelessly, we shall find out. Go now, my daughter. You may rest assured that your mother will watch over your honor. Marguerite went out. Ah, murmured Catherine, they are in league. Henry and Marguerite are working together. While the wife is silent, the husband is blind. Ah, you are very clever, my children, and you think yourselves very strong. But your strength is in your union, and I will break you, one after the other. Besides, the day will come when Marrevel can speak or write, utter a name, or spell 6 letters, and then we shall know everything. Yes, but in the meantime the guilty shall be in safekeeping. The best thing to do would be to separate them at once. Thereupon Catherine set out for the apartments of her son, whom she found holding a conference with D'Alencon. Ah, exclaimed Charles IX, frowning. Is it you, mother? Why did you not say again? The word was in your mind, Charles. What is in my mind belongs to me, madam, said the king, in the rough tone he sometimes used even when speaking to Catherine. What do you want of me? Tell me quickly. Well, you were right, my son, said Catherine to Charles, and you, D'Alencon, were wrong. In what respect? Madam, asked both princes. It was not Monsieur de la Mole who was in the apartments of the King of Navarre. Ah, cried Francois, growing pale. Who was it, then? Asked Charles. We do not know yet, but we shall know when Marrevel is able to speak. So let us drop the subject, which will soon be explained, and return to Monsieur de la Mole. Well, what do you want of Monsieur de la Mole, mother, since he was not in the rooms of the King of Navarre? No, said Catherine, he was not there, but he was with the Queen. With the Queen? Cried Charles, bursting into a nervous laugh. With the Queen? Murmured D'Alencon, turning as pale as death. No, said Charles. The guys told me he had met Marguerite's litter. Yes, said Catherine, she has a house in town. In the Rue Cloche-Percée, cried the king. Oh, this is too much, said D'Alencon, driving his nails into his breast, and to have had him recommended to me. Ah, now that I think of it, said the king, stopping suddenly, it was who defended himself against us last night, and who held the silver bowl at my head, the wretch. Oh, yes, repeated Francois, the wretch. You are right, my children, said Catherine, without appearing to understand the feelings which incited both of her sons to speak. You are right, for a single indiscreet act of this gentleman might cause a horrible scandal and ruin a daughter of France. One moment of madness would be enough for that. Or of vanity, said Francois. No doubt, no doubt, said Charles. And yet we cannot bring the case into court unless Henry consents to appear as plaintiff. My son, said Catherine, placing her hand on Charles's shoulder in such a way as to call the king's attention to what she was about to propose. Listen to what I say. A crime has been committed, and there may be scandal. But this sort of offense of royalty is not punished by judges and hangmen. If you were a simple gentleman, I should have nothing to say to you, for you are both brave. But you are princes. You cannot cross swords with mere country squires. Think how you can avenge yourselves as princes. The devil, cried Charles. You are right, mother, and I will consider it. I will help you, brother, cried Francois. And I, said Catherine, unfastening the black silk girdle which was wound 3 times about her waist, and the 2 tassels of which fell to her knees. I will retire, but I leave you this to represent me. And she threw the girdle at the feet of the 2 princes. Ah, said Charles, I understand. This girdle, said d'Alencon, picking it up, is punishment in silence, said Catherine, victorious. But, she added, there will be no harm in mentioning this to Henry. She withdrew. By heaven, said d'Alencon, a good idea, and when Henry knows that his wife has betrayed him. So, he added, turning to the king, you will adopt our mother's suggestion. In every detail, said Charles, not doubting but that he would drive 1,000 daggers into d'Alencon's heart. This will annoy Marguerite, but it will delight Henry. Then, calling one of his guards, he ordered Henry summoned, but thinking better of it. No, said he, I will go for him myself. Do you, d'Alencon, inform Danjou and de Guise. Leaving his apartments, he ascended the private stairway to the 2nd floor, which led to Henry's chamber. Chapter 39. Project of Revenge. Henry took advantage of the respite afforded him by his well-sustained examination to go to Madame de Sauve's. He found Orhan completely recovered from his fainting fit, but Orhan could tell him nothing, except that some men had broken into the king's rooms, that the leader had struck him with the handle of his sword, and that the blow had stunned him. No one had troubled about Orhan. Catherine had seen that he had fainted and had believed him to be dead. As he had come to himself between the departure of the Queen Mother and the arrival of the captain of the guards charged with clearing up the room, he had taken refuge in Madame de Sauve's apartments. Henry begged Charlotte to keep the young man until news came from de Mouy, who would not fail to right him from his hiding place. Then he would send Orhan to carry his answer to de Mouy, and instead of 1 devoted man he could count on 2. This decided on, he returned to his rooms and began further to consider matters, walking up and down the while. Suddenly the door opened and the king appeared. Your Majesty, cried Henry, rising to meet him, in person. Really, Henry, you are a good fellow, and I love you more and more. Sire, said Henry, your Majesty overwhelms me. You have but one fault, Henry. What is that? The one for which your Majesty has already reproached me several times, said Henry. My preferring to hunt animals rather than birds. No, I'm not referring to that. Henry, I mean something else. If your Majesty will explain, said Henry, who saw from the smile on Charles's lips that the king was in a good humor, I will try and correct it. It is this, that having such good eyes, you see no better than you do. Bah, said Henry, can I be short-sighted, then, sire, without knowing it? Worse than that, Henry, worse than that, you are blind. Ah, indeed, said the Bene, but is it not when I shut my eyes that this happens? Well, yes, said Charles, you are perfectly capable of that. At all events, I'm going to open your eyes. God said, let there be light, and there was light. Your Majesty is the representative of God on earth. Therefore you can do here what God does in heaven. Proceed, I am all attention. When the guy said last night that your wife had just passed escorted by a gallant, you would not believe it. Sire, said Henry, how could I believe that the sister of your Majesty could commit an act of such imprudence? When he told you that your wife had gone to the Rue Cloche-Passy, you would not believe that either. How was I to suppose, sire, that a daughter of France would thus publicly risk her reputation? When we besieged a house in the Rue Cloche-Passy, and when I had a silver bowl held at my shoulder, Danju some orange marmalade on his head, and the guys a haunch of venison in the face, you saw 2 women and 2 men, did you not? I saw nothing, sire. Does not your majesty remember that I was questioning the janitor? Yes, but, by heaven, I saw... Ah, if your majesty saw anything, that is a different thing. I saw 2 men and 2 women. Well, I know now beyond a doubt that one of the women was Margot, and that one of the men was Monsieur de la Mole. Well, said Henry, if Monsieur de la Mole was in the Rue Cloche-Passy, he was not here. No, said Charles, he was not here. But never mind who was here. We shall know this as soon as an imbecile of a Marrevel is able to speak or write. The point is that Margot is deceiving you. Bah, said Henry, do not believe such nonsense. When I tell you that you are more than nearsighted, that you are blind, the devil, will you believe me just once? Stupid? I tell you that Margot is deceiving you, and that this evening we are going to strangle her lover. Henry gave a start of surprise, and looked at his brother-in-law in amazement. Confess, Henry, that at heart you are not sorry. Margot will cry out like 1,000 Niobes, but, faith, so much the worse. I do not want you to be made a fool of. If Condé is deceived by the Duc d'Anjou, I will wink. Condé is my enemy, but you are my brother. More than this, you are my friend. But, sire, and I do not want you to be annoyed and made a fool of. You have been a Quintin long enough for all these popinjays who come from the provinces to gather our crumbs and court our women. Let them come, or rather let them come again. By heaven, you have been deceived and riot. That might happen to anyone, but I swear you shall have shining satisfaction, and tomorrow they shall say, in the name of 1,000 devils, it seems that King Charles loves his brother Henriot, for last night he had Monsieur de la Mole's tongue pulled out in a most amusing manner. Is this really decided on, sire? Asked Henry. Decided on, determined on, arranged. The coxcomb will have no time to plead his cause. The expedition will consist of myself, Danjou, d'Alencon, and de Guise, a king, 2 sons of France, and a sovereign prince, without counting you. How without counting me? Why, you are to be one of us. I. Yes, you. You shall stab the fellow in a royal manner, while the rest of us strangle him. Sire, said Henry, your kindness overpowers me, but how do you know? Why, the devil. It seems that the fellow boasts of it. He goes sometimes to your wife's apartments in the Louvre, sometimes to the Rue Cloche-Passy. They compose verses together. I should like to see the stanzas that Fop writes. Pastorales they discuss Bion and Moschus, and read first Daphne and then Corydon. Take a good dagger with you. Sire, said Henry, upon reflection. What? Your Majesty will see that I cannot join such an expedition. It seems to me it would be inconvenient to be there in person. I am too much interested in the affair to take any calm part in it. Your Majesty will avenge the honor of your sister on a coxcomb who boasts of having calumniated my wife. Nothing is simpler. And Marguerite, whom I hold to be innocent, sire, is in no way dishonoured. But were I of the party, it would be a different thing. My cooperation would convert an act of justice into an act of revenge. It would no longer be an execution, but an assassination. My wife would no longer be calumniated, but guilty. By heaven, Henry, as I said just now to my mother, you speak words of wisdom. You have a devilishly quick mind. And Charles gazed complacently at his brother-in-law, who bowed in return for the compliment. Nevertheless, added Charles, you are willing to be rid of this coxcomb, are you not? Everything your Majesty does is well done, replied the King of Navarre. Well, let me do your work for you. You may be sure it shall not be the worse for it. I leave it to you, sire, said Henry. At what time does he usually go to your wife's room? About 9 o'clock. And he leaves? Before I reach there, for I never see him. About 11. Very well. Come this evening at midnight. The deed will be done. Charles pressed Henry's hand cordially, and renewing his vows of friendship, left the apartment, whistling his favorite hunting song. Venter St. Gris, said the Béarnais, watching Charles. Either I am greatly mistaken, or the Queen Mother is responsible for all this deviltry. Truly, she does nothing but invent plots to make trouble between my wife and myself. Such a pleasant household. And Henry began to laugh, as he was in the habit of laughing when no one could see or hear him. About 7 o'clock that evening, a handsome young man, who had just taken a bath, was finishing his toilet as he calmly moved about his room, humming a little air before a mirror in one of the rooms of the Louvre. Near him another young man was sleeping, or rather lying on a bed. The one was our friend La Mole, who, unconsciously, had been the object of so much discussion all day. The other was his companion Coconnas. The great storm had passed over him without his having heard the rumble of the thunder or seen the lightning. He had returned at 3 o'clock in the morning, had stayed in bed until 3 in the afternoon, half asleep, half awake, building castles on the uncertain sand called the future. Then he had risen, had spent an hour at a fashionable bath, had dined at Maître Lahirier's, and returning to the Louvre had set himself to finish his toilet before making his usual call on the Queen. "And you say you have dined?" asked Coconnas, yawning. "Faith, yes, and I was hungry too." "Why did you not take me with you, selfish man?" "Faith, you were sleeping so soundly that I did not like to waken you, but you shall sup with me instead. Be sure not to forget to ask Maître Lahirier for some of that light wine from Anjou, which arrived a few days ago." "Is it good?" "I merely tell you to ask for it." "Where are you going?" "Where am I going?" said La Mole, surprised that his friend should ask him such a question. "I am going to pay my respects to the Queen." "Well," said Coconnas, "if I were going to dine in our little house in the Rue Cloche-Percé, I should have what was left over from yesterday. There is a certain wine of Alicante which is most refreshing. It would be imprudent to go there, Annibal, my friend, after what occurred last night. Besides, did we not promise that we would not go back there alone? Hand me my cloak." "That is so," said Coconnas. "I had forgotten. But where the devil is your cloak?" "Ah, here it is." "No, you have given me the black one, and it is the red one I want. The Queen likes me better in that." "Ah, faith," said Coconnas, searching everywhere. "Look for yourself. I cannot find it." "What?" said La Mole. "You cannot find it. Why, where can it be?" "You probably sold it." "Why, I have 6 crowns left." "Well, take mine." "Ah, yes, a yellow cloak with a green doublet. I should look like a popinjay." "Faith, you are over-particular, so wear what you please." Having tossed everything topsy-turvy in his search, La Mole was beginning to abuse the thieves who managed to enter even the Louvre, when a page from the Duc d'Alencon appeared bringing the precious cloak in question. "Ah!" cried La Mole, "here it is at last." "Is this your cloak, monsieur?" said the page. "Yes, Monseigneur sent for it to decide a wager he made regarding its color." "Oh," said La Mole, "I asked for it only because I was going out, but if His Highness desires to keep it longer—" "No, Monsieur le Comte, he is through with it." The page left. La Mole fastened his cloak. "Well," he went on, "what have you decided to do?" "I do not know." "Shall I find you here this evening?" "How can I tell?" "Do you not know what you are going to do for 2 hours?" "I know well enough what I shall do, but I do not know what I may be ordered to do." "By the Duchesse de Nevers." "No, by the Duc d'Alencon." "As a matter of fact," said La Mole, "I have noticed for some time that he has been friendly to you." "Yes," said Coconnas. "Then your fortune is made," said La Mole, laughing. "Pouf," said Coconnas. "He is only a younger brother." "Oh," said La Mole. He is so anxious to become the elder one that perhaps heaven will work a miracle in his favor. So you do not know where you will be this evening? No. Go to the devil. Then I mean goodbye. That La Mole is a terrible fellow, thought Coconnas, always wanting me to tell him where I am going to be, as if I knew. Besides, I believe I am sleepy. And he threw himself on the bed again. La Mole betook himself to the apartments of the queen. In the corridor he met the Duc d'Alencon. "Ah, you here, Monsieur La Mole," said the prince. "Yes, my lord," replied La Mole, bowing respectfully. "Are you going away from the Louvre?" "No, your highness. I am on my way to pay my respects to Her Majesty the Queen of Navarre." "About what time shall you leave, Monsieur de La Mole?" "Has Monseigneur any orders for me?" "No, not at present, but I shall want to speak to you this evening." "About what time?" "Between 9 and 10. I shall do myself the honor of waiting on your highness at that time." "Very good. I shall depend on you." La Mole bowed and went on. "There are times," said he, "when the Duke is as pale as death. It is very strange." He knocked at the door of the Queen's apartments. Galon, who apparently was expecting him, led him to Marguerite. The latter was occupied with some work, which seemed to be wearying her greatly. A paper covered with notes and a volume of Isocrates lay before her. She signed to La Mole to let her finish a paragraph. Then, in a few moments, she threw down her pen and invited the young man to sit beside her. La Mole was radiant. Never had he been so handsome or so light-hearted. "Greek," said he, glancing at the book. "A speech of Isocrates. What are you doing with that?" "Ah, and Latin on this sheet of paper. Ad sammaci legatos regni Marguerite Concio. So you are going to harangue these barbarians in Latin." "I must," said Marguerite, "since they do not speak French." "But how can you write the answer before you have the speech?" "A greater coquette than I would make you believe that this was impromptu. But I cannot deceive you, my Hyacinth. I was told the speech in advance, and I am answering it." "Are these ambassadors about to arrive?" "Better still, they arrived this morning." "Does anyone know it?" "They came incognito. Their formal arrival is planned for tomorrow afternoon, I believe, and you will see," said Marguerite, with a little satisfied and not wholly free from pedantry, "that what I have done this evening is quite Ciceronian. But let us drop these important matters and speak of what has happened to you." "To me?" "Yes. What has happened to me?" "Ah, it is in vain you pretend to be brave. You look pale. Then it is from having slept too much. I am humbly sorry for it." Come, let us not play the braggart. I know everything." "Have the kindness to inform me, then, my pearl, for I know nothing." "Well, answer me frankly. What did the Queen Mother ask you? Had she something to say to me?" "What? Have you not seen her?" "No, nor King Charles." "No, nor the King of Navarre." "No, but you have seen the Duc d'Alencon." "Yes, I met him just now in the corridor." "What did he say to you?" "That he had some orders to give me between 9 and 10 o'clock this evening." "Nothing else?" "Nothing else." "That is strange." "But what is strange? Tell me." "That nothing has been said to you." "What has happened?" "All day, unfortunately, you have been hanging over an abyss." "I?" "Yes, you." "Why?" "Well, listen. It seems that last night Demouy was surprised in the apartments of the King of Navarre, who was to have been arrested. Demouy killed 3 men, and escaped without anything about him having been recognized except the famous red cloak." Well, this red cloak, which once deceived me, has thrown others besides myself off the track. You have been suspected and even accused of this triple murder. This morning they wanted to arrest, judge, and perhaps convict you. Who knows? For in order to save yourself, you would not have told where you were, would you?" "Tell where I was," cried La Mole. "Compromise you, my beautiful queen? Oh, You are right. I should have died singing, to spare your sweet eyes one tear. Alas, said Marguerite, my sweet eyes would have been filled with many, many tears. But what caused a great storm to subside? Guess. How can I tell? There was only one way to prove that you were not in the king's room, and that was to tell where you were. Well, I told. Whom did you tell? My mother, and Queen Catherine. Queen Catherine knows that I love you. Oh, madam, after having done so much for me, you can demand anything from your servant. Ah, Marguerite, truly, what you did was noble and beautiful. My life is yours, Marguerite. I hope so, for I have snatched it from those who wanted to take it from me. But now you are saved. And by you, cried the young man, by my adored queen. At that instant a sharp noise made them start. La Mole sprang back, filled with a vague terror. Marguerite uttered a cry, and stood with her eyes riveted on the broken glass of one of the window panes. Through this window a stone the size of an egg had entered and lay on the floor. La Mole saw the broken pane, and realized the cause of the noise. Who dared to do this? He cried, springing to the window. One moment, said Marguerite. It seems to me that something is tied around the stone. Yes, said La Mole. It looks like a piece of paper. Marguerite went to the strained projectile and removed a thin sheet which, folded like a narrow band, encircled the middle of the stone. The paper was attached to a cord, which came through the broken window. Marguerite unfolded the letter and read. Unfortunate man, she cried, holding out the paper to La Mole, who stood as pale and motionless as a statue of terror. With a heart filled with gloomy forebodings, he read these words. They are waiting for Monsieur de La Mole, with long swords, in the corridor leading to the apartments of Monsieur d'Alencon. Perhaps he would prefer to escape by this window and join Monsieur de Mouy at Mantes. Well, asked La Mole, after reading it, are these swords longer than mine? No, but there may be 10 against 1. Who is the friend who has sent us this note? Asked La Mole. Marguerite took it from a young man's hand and looked at it attentively. The King of Navarre's handwriting, she cried. If he warns us, the danger is great. Flee, La Mole, flee, I beg you. How? Asked La Mole. By this window. Does not the note refer to it? Command, my queen, and I will leap from the window to obey you, if I broke my head 20 times by the fall. Wait, said Marguerite. It seems to me that there is a weight attached to this cord. Let us see, said La Mole. Both drew up the cord, and with indescribable joy saw a ladder of hair and silk at the end of it. Ah, you are saved, cried Marguerite. It is a miracle of heaven. No, it is a gift from the King of Navarre. But suppose it were a snare, said La Mole. If this ladder were to break under me, madam, did you not acknowledge your love for me today? Marguerite, whose joy had dissipated her grief, became ashy pale. You are right, said she, that is possible. She started to the door. What are you going to do? Cried La Mole. To find out if they are really waiting for you in the corridor. Never, for their anger to fall on you. What can they do to a daughter of France? As a woman and a royal princess, I am doubly inviolable. The queen uttered these words with so much dignity that La Mole understood she ran no risk, and that he must let her do as she wished. Marguerite put La Mole under protection of Galon, leaving to him to decide, according to circumstances, whether to run or await her return, and started down the corridor. A side hall led to the library as well as to several reception rooms, and at the end led to the apartments of the king, the queen mother, and to the small private stairway by which one reached the apartments of the Duc d'Alencon and Henry. Although it was scarcely 9 o'clock, all the lights were extinguished, and the corridor, except for the dim glimmer which came from the side hall, was quite dark. The Queen of Navarre advanced boldly. When she had gone about a third of the distance, she heard whispering which sounded mysterious and startling from an evident effort made to suppress it. It ceased almost instantly, as if by order from some superior, and silence was restored. The light, dim as it was, seemed to grow less. Marguerite walked on directly into the face of the danger, if danger there was. To all appearances, she was calm, although her clenched hands indicated a violent nervous tension. As she approached, the intense silence increased, while a shadow like that of a hand obscured the wavering and uncertain light. At the point where the transverse hole crossed the main corridor, a man sprang in front of the queen, uncovered a red candlestick, and cried out, "Here he is!" Marguerite stood face to face with her brother Charles. Behind him, a silken cord in hand, was the Duc d'Alencon. At the rear, in the darkness, stood two figures side by side, reflecting no light other than the drawn swords which they held in their hands. Marguerite saw everything at a glance. Making a supreme effort, she said smilingly to Charles, "You mean, here she is, sire." Charles recoiled. The other stood motionless. "You, Margot," said he, "where are you going at this hour?" "At this hour," said Marguerite. "Is it so late?" "I ask where you are going." "To find a book of Cicero's speeches, which I think I left at our mother's." "Without a light?" "I suppose the corridor was lighted." "Do you come from your own apartments?" "Yes." "What are you doing this evening?" "Preparing my address for the Polish ambassadors. Is there not a council tomorrow? And does not each one have to submit his address to your majesty? Have you not someone helping you with this work?" Marguerite summoned all her strength. "Yes, brother," said she, "Monsieur de la Mole. He is very learned." "So much so," said the Duc d'Alencon, "that I asked him when he had finished with you, 'Sister, to come and help me, for I am not as clever as you are.'" "And were you waiting for him?" asked Marguerite as naturally as possible. "Yes," said d'Alencon impatiently. "Then," said Marguerite, "I will send him to you, brother, for we have finished my work." "But your book?" said Charles. "I will have Guillaume get it." The two brothers exchanged a sign. "Go," said Charles, "and we will continue our round." "Your round," said Marguerite. "Whom are you looking for?" "The little red man," said Charles. "Do you not know that there is a little red man who is said to haunt the old Louvre? My brother d'Alencon claims to have seen him, and we are looking for him." "Good luck to you," said Marguerite, and she turned round. Glancing behind her, she saw the four figures gather close to the wall as if in conference. In an instant she had reached her own door. "Open, Guillaume," said she. "Open." Guillaume obeyed. Marguerite sprang into the room and found La Mole waiting for her, calm and quiet, but with drawn sword. "Flee," said she, "flee. Do not lose a second. They are waiting for you in the corridor to kill you." "You command me to do this," said La Mole. "I command it. We must part in order to see each other again." While Marguerite had been away, La Mole had made sure of the ladder at the window. He now stepped out, but before placing his foot on the first round, he tenderly kissed the queen's hand. "If the ladder is a trap and I should perish, Marguerite, remember your promise." It was not a promise, La Mole, but an oath. "Fear nothing. Adieu." And La Mole, thus encouraged, let himself slip down the ladder. At the same instant there was a knock at the door. Marguerite watched La Mole's perilous descent and did not turn away from the window until she was sure he had reached the ground in safety. "Madam," said Guillaume, "madam." "Well?" asked Marguerite. "The king is knocking at the door." "Open it." Guillaume did so. The four princes, impatient at waiting, no doubt, stood on the threshold. Charles entered. Marguerite came forward, a smile on her lips. The king cast a rapid glance around. "Whom are you looking for, brother?" asked Marguerite. "Why?" said Charles. I am looking, why, the devil. I am looking for Monsieur de la Mole." "Monsieur de la Mole?" "Yes. Where is he?" Marguerite took her brother by the hand and led him to the window. Just then 2 horsemen were seen galloping away around the wooden tower. One of them unfastened his white satin scarf and waved it in the darkness as a sign of adieu. The 2 men were La Mole and Orthan. Marguerite pointed them out to Charles. "Well," said the king, "what does this mean?" "It means," replied Marguerite, "that Monsieur le Duc d'Alencon may put his cord back into his pocket, and that Messrs. Dinju and de Guise may sheathe their swords, for Monsieur de la Mole will not pass through the corridor again tonight."